Pray. Heavenly Father, a human community, the context in which we learn, in a friendship, strengthen those serve in this place, quality of our community. There is potential for enjoyment can be had, engaged fully. Art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those that trespass. Lead us not. Deliver us. Thine is the kingdom.
This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 25th April 2023 to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the adoption of the minutes of Tuesday, 25th April 2023.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 9th May 2023 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes of 9th May 2023 be deferred.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by His Honor the Speaker.
I wish to acknowledge the presence of representatives from UNICEF, from BADMC, from the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, and the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security.
Messages from Her Excellency the President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42.5, 43 and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 7, in the name of the Honourable Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, to move the second reading of the Child Protection Bill 2023.
Honourable Member St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is my greatest pleasure, sir, to move this bill this morning, sir, to begin a conversation, sir, or to continue, rather, a conversation that is very important to this country, one that started long before my time in this chair, and the work, sir, that I have the privilege to be able, hopefully, sir, to deliver to the people and particularly the children of this country. So I want to begin, as most decent people would, by thanking the persons who are responsible for this bill in the first place and on whose ginormous shoulders I stand. And we don't often get to thank, sir, in the public domain, the people who've helped us, sir, but permit me to say just a few names, perhaps, sir, but mostly the institutions that have helped me. I want to begin, sir, by thanking, of course, my predecessor, the Honourable Cynthia Ford, the former Minister of People Empowerment, sir, who would have started this work, Cynthia Ford, who would have started this work before me, and so I came to the ministry and found a draft that I was allowed to complete. I want to begin by thanking her. I think this country owes the Honourable Member for St. Thomas such a debt of gratitude for her work, both in terms of the Parliament and her work as an MP for St. Thomas. I really want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for St. Thomas. I also want to thank, sir, the staff in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, many of whom are here, as you just rightfully said, who would have done a lot of work, sir, for us to be able to be here this morning. I really want to thank all of my staff who are here by choice and who are here to make sure, sir, that this very important work, sir.
You're saying that we're not mandated, sir?
Oh, no.
Continue, Honourable Member.
Sir, because we are doing such important work, sir, the staff in the ministry works tremendously hard, sir. It's one of the staffs in the country, I don't even know if that's proper English, but it's one of the set of persons in this country, sir, who work tirelessly through COVID. And now the ministry is tasked with bringing some important bills at the same time. This child protection bill is the first, but before the end of the year, we'll be bringing bills related to persons with disabilities and also on the elderly. And at the same time, landing an amalgamation that has seemed to have eluded us for a number of years, sir. I want to thank the staff in the Ministry of People Empowerment. I want to thank my permanent secretary and the former permanent secretary, but particularly this permanent secretary, Mr. Wiltshire, sir. Just a few names, and then I'll move on. For the tremendous work that he has done, sir, since he became the permanent secretary. I also want to thank the UNICEF, sir, for the work that UNICEF has done in this country and in this region, sir, particularly on this bill. I would tell you, sir, we would not be here were it not for the assistance of UNICEF. I really want to thank you, the representatives of UNICEF, specifically Ms. Heather Stewart and Mr. Peter Belt. I think I pronounced it right, hopefully, close to, who would have helped us, but all the representatives of UNICEF for all the work that they would have done, sir, to make sure that we are able to bring this very important piece of legislation. And by the end of this conversation, sir, you would appreciate why I consider this to be one of the most important pieces of legislation that we have brought to this House in our time. I also must thank Ms. Jacqueline Seeley-Burke, who was the consultant working on both this bill, the Child Protection Bill, and the Child Justice Bill. And again, we would not be here without her support, sir. I mean, I was able to call her during the night, during the early hours in the morning, to be able to do this work. You must know Ms. Sophia Moore, another young lawyer in Barbados, sir, who also helped with this bill, and Ms. Faith Marshall Harris. Sir, I would not be able to deliver this bill without the support of all those persons, sir, and I really want to thank them for the support that they have given us to be able to do this most important bill this morning, sir. I begin, sir, humble, because I know, sir, having started this bill as minister, that I did work for the Child Care Board as manager for a number of years, sir. In fact, I was the manager of administration right after you were the manager of administration, sir. And so you would appreciate that a lot of the things that we're going to discuss in this bill are real issues that we have to be able to address. We have a population, sir, of children with real issues that we have to be able to address. We have a country that relies, sir, on our children being able to meet and to make and to match their fullest potential, sir. If we are able to get the best out of this country, sir, it is important that we focus on the children, sir. I believe that children who are protected, sir, are children who are productive. And that they will go on, sir, to be able to do and bring glory to this country, but we must first do the basics So we must address the things that harm children. We must put in place the systems that allow them to reach their fullest potential. I believe generations of children will thank us for the work that we will do in this Parliament over the next few weeks, sir. I am happy to be Minister, I repeat, sir, to be able to bring this legislation, sir, because I know that it is important. But that in the context of the legislation, sir, it is not only the legislation that we must bring. I believe, as I begin this conversation, that we must bring a children's policy, a national child policy. I think this is going to be critical, sir, to set the context within which this legislation must work. And to say that it is not only going to be about protection, thank you, it's not only going to be about protection, but it is going to be about a holistic policy that covers, sir, a number of areas, including education, nutrition, child participation, of course, their protection, sir, survival, their health, a number of very critical issues, sir. That child policy, we hope to work with UNICEF to be able to settle that national child policy very soon. I think it is going to be very important, sir. We've aligned ourselves with the Convention of the Rights of the Child. I think that is important. It's important to state that Barbados ratified that convention in 1990. So that this is not anything new, because I know there are a set of people who have taken now to attacking the government for everything, to say that this government, sir, is not doing its work or that we're being guided by some unseen, unholy force, but that this Convention of the Rights of the Child was ratified in 1990, long before most of us were in here, or any of us, I think, were in here, sir, and ratified not because it was driven by somebody else, but because this is important work, and I support the ratification, sir. But I want to put that out there so that people understand that this is something that has been happening for decades and that we are bringing to closure something that has started long before. We ratified the convention, but in many ways we did not live up to what we had ratified, sir. And this bill seeks to make that right, sir, as we begin this conversation. And I think that is very, very, very important, sir. We also know that unless we have a multi-sectoral approach to dealing with these issues, we will get nowhere. I believe that this conversation is equally important for health as it is for the Ministry of People Empowerment. It is as important for the Ministry of Education as it is for my ministry, the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Finance. That this is a conversation, sir, that cuts across all of the ministries, sir. And I'm pretty sure when the time comes, all of the honourable members in here will have something to say. Because either, sir, we were once children, we either have children, we mentor children. As MPs, sir, we serve children. This affects all of us one way or the other. I can think of no child, sir, in this country that this does not affect. I can think of no adult that was not once a child. This affects everyone, sir. And I want to set that context because I feel when people hear that something is coming from a particular ministry, they box it in. This is for the Ministry of People Empowerment. This does not affect me. But the issues in health have to affect children, as would the issues in housing have to affect children. And this is very important, sir, that we must set the context, sir. And there are a number of things that we want to be able to discuss when we discuss this policy, sir, some of which I would want to mention. The first, sir, is simple, that childhood is an integral part of life with a value of its own. You have to let children be children. When I was manager of the Child Care Board, sir, I remember one conversation I had with the former director, one more name, sir, Ms. Joan Crawford. And she was making the point very casually, but very profoundly, that the punishment must not suit the crime, but that the punishment must suit the child. And that you have to look at children as individuals, sir, to be able to say that this particular child will benefit from this particular intervention. And that we have built, sir, as you will see during the course of this conversation, we have built a system and have been so loyal to that system, even though the circumstances have changed. Even though the children have changed, sir. We've been so loyal to the system that we've been disloyal to the children. That has to change, sir. And that this bill begins that process of change. I would also tell you, sir, that we had a conversation in my ministry. We brought together some young people to discuss this and other bills, because it doesn't make sense to bring a bill and to say that this bill is relevant to a particular class of people and not listen to that class of people. You would agree. So unless if you're talking about children, you need to talk to some children. If you're talking about young people, talk to some young people. And we had a conversation, sir, the permanent secretary and myself. We brought a whole set of young people into the ministry. We began this conversation, sir, on issues affecting them. And that conversation, sir, while it was an eye-opener for me to a point, because I spend so much time with young children, my permanent secretary would tell you that it was one of the most eye-opening conversations for him. And that many of us come to this place and other places and we build policies, we build buildings, we build legislation, sir. We create this architecture that is supposed to reflect the interests of children, sir. We don't even begin to understand them these days, or how it is that they have changed, sir. That is why their participation is so important. But as we began that conversation, sir, it was clear to me that what children anticipate as normal now are things that some of us who are a little bit older find in some instances to be strange, distant, foreign, and some of us even find it offensive. But that our children, in many cases, sir, are on a different playing field. And that we have to find a way, sir, to be able to relate to these children by listening to them. I grew up in a generation, sir, where children were told, you must be seen and not heard. And in some cases, when guests came over to the house, you weren't even to be seen either. You had to go in the back bedroom and you couldn't say anything. When your mother had 8 children, like my mother had 8 children, talking was a gift. You couldn't talk too often because, parents are busy doing other things. Most of us who grew up in those circumstances, so we ask ourselves why it is that Barbadian children, brilliant as they are, you check the marks. Doing fantastic work, getting A's, nearly 100% on all their tests, you ask them to stand up and say something. Ask them to stand up and have a conversation on an issue. Most of them, sir, as bright as they are, so don't mistake me for saying they're not bright. These children are bright, but afraid to open their mouth and to speak. Because we've inherited from our regrettable history, we've inherited and we have been so loyal to it, a lot of things from our slave past that you're not supposed to say anything. And so you find our brilliant children being out-debated by people who are not even in their class. You find that Barbadian children leave Barbados and some of them struggling here and go and join the American system and excel. Because our educational system is different. We have to change that though. Because what would have worked for children in the earlier days, sir, may not necessarily work now. We have to retool. As we ask our older population to retool, we have a responsibility, sir, to retool our children so that they become competitive, sir, in a new global environment. And I fear, sir, that if we remain loyal to things of the past, we will miss the boat. Bob Dylan had a song, sir. I think he wrote it in '63. The times they are changing. If people don't know that song, they really should go and listen to it. If people don't know that song, they really should go and listen to it. The times they are changing, sir. And there is a verse where he talks about mothers and fathers, sir. And that the fact that the mothers and fathers who are across the land, they shouldn't criticize because they don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. The old road is rapidly changing. He says you gotta get out of the old road. And if you can't lend a hand, because the times they are changing. And I'm not saying, sir, that they're not values that we have to give our children, sir, but that they're changing. And that we have to be able to adapt. There is no single, sir, species of life that has survived that has not been able to adapt. It is the process of adaptation that guarantees life. We have, sir, to be able to adapt. And so what is the context, sir, within which we're having this conversation? We have all been aware that our colonial past, sir, stays with us. We are all aware, sir, that this generation, sir, most of us, this society was birthed in violence, sir. We know that there was unequal treatment, sir. That is part of who we are. It's part of our DNA, sir. We all know that slavery was nothing more than state-sanctioned violence. We all know all of these things, and we appreciate these things. The tragedy, I think, of our current thinking is that we do not separate slavery, or we try to separate, really, slavery from a lot of the things that we're now seeing. We don't have a conversation with it. I try to talk about it, people get uncomfortable. These are things that we need to be able to discuss, because I'm telling you that a lot of the things that were given to us as part of the norm as a family on a plantation, sir, is still coming back to haunt us, sir. But in any progressive society, sir, we cannot overstate how important it is to talk about children and to put the rights of children first. So the Convention of the Rights of the Child, sir, while that forms the basis for most of the legislation across the world, really, when it comes to children, sir, is not the reason that I am driving this legislation. I am fortunate, sir, we are fortunate that our values as a country align with the Convention of the Rights of the Child, but we are driving this based on who we are and on Barbadian values, sir. That is why this is important. This is built on who we are, to be able, sir, to protect our children over time, sir. But there are a few articles on the convention, sir, that I would wish to address. Article 3, what is in the best interest of the child? And I make this association only so people, because I know there are people who are already saying that we are doing other people's business. And the reality is, sir, that listen to these articles, sir, and you will see what is in the best interest of the child. All of us in here would agree that that should drive our work. Article 12, sir, respect for the views of the child. We talk about that, sir. You know, it's still very difficult sometimes for parents to listen and to respect the views of their children. I have 2 children, sir. My first daughter is now 18 years old. She's an adult, and she lets me know daily. My second daughter will be 3 shortly, probably just over a week. These 2 young people are so different. I mean, so completely different. I remember what Ms. Crawford said, sir, you can't punish the crime, it has to suit the child. But the times in which they are growing up to is so different. What we take for granted now, sir, back in the day, sir, I remember people talking on the Jetsons, you would see video calling, and you would say that's impossible, that would never happen. And now we take it for granted. Our phones carry more technology than the first ship that went into space. Times are changing. I watched my 3-year-old pick up the phone and zoom in across onto YouTube. She almost 3, picking the channel that she wants, changing the thing and she doesn't like it. It's phenomenal. It is difficult to come and say to that child who at 3 years old has seen more than most of us would have seen at 3, to expect to put them within the same boundaries, sir. We have to respect their views because they know more. I listened to the call-in program over the weekend. Young people were simply saying that they want a chance to be heard in this country and that they do not want lip service paid to their point of view. They just want to be heard in this country. If you've not heard a child its entire life, if it's not become your style, it becomes very difficult as an adult to do it. It's difficult to bend old wood. But if you, sir, have grown up listening to children, it becomes a lot easier, sir. And then there are a whole set of other ones, sir. I like Article 5 particularly too because it speaks to the rights of parents. Many people hear me talk about this legislation, sir, and they assume that because you're talking about the rights of children that you've somehow taken away the rights of parents. Nothing could be further from the truth. The convention, just like this legislation, sir, promotes the rights of parents. It respects the rights of parents, sir. Nobody is losing any rights by this convention, sir. I think that is important because I know some parents get nervous. When I was at Child Care Board, I would meet with the churches sometimes and different groups, and I remember one church in particular. They were adamant that the convention would somehow take away their rights, and it does not do that, sir. But you know, it's funny because if you say Black Lives Matter, people who are not black tend to think that you are somehow trying to get at them. If I say, as I've said before, if I want to promote the rights of women, men often hear that somehow I'm trying to take away the rights of men. That is not the case, sir. This is a child protection bill. It will focus on the children, sir, but we are not taking away the rights of any other group. This convention, this legislation, sir, promotes the rights of the parents, sir, and that is very important because I know there's some people who are concerned. There are many people, sir, who are concerned that when we pass this legislation, all of a sudden it will be a free-for-all for children. Parents still have to raise their children in this country. Our government, sir, has committed to doing a whole set of parenting programs to help give parents the tools. That is also one of the things that I've found, you know. When I was director of the Constituency Empowerment Department, sir, and when I was with Pinelands, we would do these homework programs, and then we'd ask the parents to come. Let us talk to the parents about parenting. And you say, let us discuss parenting, and parents hear you saying that you think that they're bad parents. You say one thing, and another thing is received. Because I know very well, sir, that when I speak to a man, I am speaking to his mother, his mother's mother, his community, his society, because all of those things fed into who he is and to his point of view. And that we have generations of things either to unlearn, sir, relearn, some things that we have to hold on to, but some things that we have to give up. And so it becomes very difficult sometimes to have this conversation, sir. But particularly in this country, we know, sir, that there are deficits in the current child protection system. Anybody who takes a look at our system, sir, from an objective point of view, would be able to say quite easily that there are deficits in the system. Anybody who takes a look, sir, at our legislative architecture, the system around it, if you look at the workload of the staff, sir, you can easily see that there is a flaw in our system. You know I don't have to tell you, because as again I said, you were a social worker and a manager at the Child Care Board. I know you defend many of them, sir, many children, many people across this country, but you know that there is a flaw in our system and that we have to be able to address this. But, sir, let me put it before the country, sir. So the main pieces of legislation, sir, that deal with children now, the three main pieces would be the Cruelty to Children Act, the Child Care Board Act, and the Supreme Court of Judicature Act. I used to get that right until one young man came in my office and pronounced it wrong and threw me off ever since. But, sir, in addition to that, the Protection of Children Act and the Young Persons Protection Act, sir. And these, first of all, just looking at it, you want to deal with children, you got to go here, there, and yonder. You can't go one place and get this situation addressed properly, either in its entirety or close to its entirety. It's all over the place. Different pieces of legislation dealing with different things. I mean, we're never going to get it perfect, but we can get a lot better than we are, sir. What we have now is broken. And, sir, we need to be able to find this legislation, sir, hopefully in one place, sir. But these combined pieces of legislation, sir, would be what the Child Care Board often would use to be able to remove a child from a house or a household or a circumstance that is difficult for the child, sir. But there are other points that need to be made about this. Sir, the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act, sir, was written in 1904. The Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act is in 1904 Act, sir. That is almost 120 years ago. It is very difficult to agree that, considering that I've outlined very carefully in my opening, sir, that the system has changed, the society has changed, and surely the children have changed. That a piece of legislation crafted, sir, when we were not really even seen as people, could now be the legislation, sir, that guides our children. There have been some amendments along the way, of course, sir, but the primary piece of the legislation is 1904. Legislation that is 120 years ago. Yesterday, sir, when we were researching this, sir, we came across the work of Henderson Carter speaking about Barbados, describing that period as being a period that was still slave-like for people of color. That very few things had changed, sir, since the emancipation period, sir, since 1838. In fact, sir, many of us who study history would know that Barbados was one of the countries, sir, where it was most difficult for the newly emancipated blacks. Because unlike other countries, we didn't have hills to run to. We didn't have vast spaces to run to. Most of the persons, sir, in the immediate post-emancipation period had to go straight back to the plantation. Country too small, country too flat. The planter class in Barbados, sir, the elite class, sir, was too close-knit, too close. They got along. By sheer desire to continue to inflict the harshest punishments on people. Our situation was different. So that in 1904, what you had, sir, was a situation, sir, where the law that was written could never have been written to service children. It surely could never have been written to service children of color. But that, sir, is the overarching architecture, sir, that guides most of us, sir. 1904, sir, was also said to be the year that Clement Payne was born. And I think, sir, that when I think about it, sir, it is now, perhaps in a way, the beginning of a movement that led to greater freedom for us, but that 1904 was too long to be the main piece of legislation, sir, that guides how we deal with our children. And I wish to reiterate, sir, I am not taking anything from the parents, but this is a child protection bill. And, sir, we are talking about the rights of children. But 1904, sir, I could only imagine the horrors, sir, for black girls, black boys, sir. I read an article, sir, and this is now in the 1930s. The plantation owner would just pass and riding his horse and just point at a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. That's the one I want this evening. So Hilary Beckles, sir, recently wrote a book where he said that the most of the children born to black girls on slave plantations were born to children between 11 and 12 years old. And that 90-something% of those, sir, were mixed race. I ain't gonna tell you what happened there. I don't have to say what happened, it's obvious. So that this 1904 legislation, sir, cannot address the issues that we have to address in a modern Barbados, sir. If you look at the Young Persons Protection Act written in 1918, sir, by virtue of these dates alone, by virtue of the scattered nature alone of the legislation, we know that we have a problem. We know that we have to come to this place, sir, to do the people's business. This is why we were elected, sir. This is why we came to office, sir. But that legislation is 1918. 1918, sir, was the end of the First World War. I mean, when I think about what was driving this legislation, sir, it could hardly be the interests of boys and girls, sir. And it surely wasn't the interest of people of color. And that therefore we have to come to this place, sir, to be able to right it wrong, again with some amendments. The funny thing is, sir, that 1904 was also the year that the global pandemic, Spanish flu, began too, which is interesting because we're now coming out of one. Now, perhaps, sir, every now and then there is a need, as nature does, there's a need to purge itself and to cleanse itself, sir, and to rob ourselves, sir, of some of the things, sir, that were given to us, to cast them aside, and to be able to look objectively, sir, at the circumstances that we must look at, sir, to be able to do the work of the people, sir. But any piece of legislation, sir, must have guiding principles. And if you don't have guiding principles, sir, then you have a problem. You know, they say if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. We cannot take any road. We, sir, have to know where it is that we are going and how it is that we intend to be able to get there. I see the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central. I know that he understands, sir, a number of these issues, sir, because he cares passionately about young people. But if you don't know where you're going, sir, any road will take you there. And, you know, the road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. You have to sit down, sir, and set down what your values are. What are the guiding principles? What drives you, sir, to be able to do the things that you need to do, sir, to be able to serve the interests of people, sir? And our first legislation, sir, had an absence of guiding principles. Our first sets of legislation, sir, which is also a problem for us. Scattered and outdated. How then do we address the wide and varied needs of the nation's children? You cannot. And that is why, sir, this bill is going to be so important, sir. We've set down, sir, new grounds for intervention in this coming legislation, sir. It is important, sir, because in the current legislation there is a dearth. There is a dearth, sir, of legal grounds on which people could intervene. A dearth, sir, which means that very few cases, the child care board will tell you, that not many cases are taken before the court because there are very few terms under which you could go to court, sir. I say it is death, it is consent, or permanent removal for the most part. For the most part, I mean there are other things. Sir, if you look at the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act, that only contemplates intervention in situations where a parent or a guardian has committed a criminal offense. That's the first one. The Child Care Board Act permits intervention where the parents agree. That's the second one. So you see, it's either a criminal offense, the other person has agreed, sir, and the Supreme Court of Judicature, you will never get me again, Judicature. Sir, that one only comes into being where warden proceedings are undertaken to permanently remove the child. This is very restrictive, sir, and does not contemplate, sir, community-based orders, and it needs, sir, other less intrusive orders from the court. When I start to go through, sir, these things that this bill allows us to do, there is no right-thinking Barbadian that should think that this is an offensive piece of legislation, sir. I should also say, sir, before I get into any further, as I will later on, that we are bringing the Child Protection Bill this week, and very soon thereafter, we will debate the Child Justice Bill, because the intention was always to read these two bills together. They were always to be read in unison. And that there are a number of issues, sir, that people come to me in the Child Protection Bill that are really issues for child justice. And for those who are asking about all those things, sir, wondering and so on, most of those will be addressed when we introduce the Child Justice Bill next week, sir. And both of these, sir, our intention is to take both of these to select committees to allow other people and the public to have further input into the bills. We did not get here, sir, by happenstance or serendipity. We spent a lot of time, sir, indeed, in consultations. We've consulted and consulted and consulted on this bill. The honourable member who sits next to me, sir, the member for St. Peter, reminded me also that we brought it to the Social Justice Committee for their input. But even though we've had several rounds of consultation, sir, we're taking the bill to select committee. That's the intention. And I will ask for your permission, sir, at some point. But that is where we are, sir, and I just want to put that in the context because people ask about justice issues. Justice has been laid and justice is coming. But, sir, I think this is important, sir, because if you ask yourself, why is it, sir, that the Child Care Board is so, in many ways, so restricted, straitjacketed? I see people, sir, on social media, when the Child Care Board is in the press, I read some of the comments. I tend not to read the comments about myself, but I read the comments about other people. I'm a typical Bajan. I don't want to hear about other people's things. But when you look at the Child Justice, the Child Care Board in the legislation, sir, or the Child Care Board in the press, and you read the comments, what did you do? Y'all didn't do nothing. Y'all need to do this. Y'all, you know how it goes. Child Care Board needs to do this. There are two things that I feel are important. One, sir, I've already said, sir, that the restrictions in the bill, the current set of bills, sir, makes it very difficult in many cases to intervene in ways people would want us to intervene. And, sir, many people want you to say, I call the Child Care Board for X parent, and I wanted those children removed from that household, and the children are still in that household, the Child Care Board has not done anything. But the reality is, sir, that the Child Care Board, as they should, they make every effort to keep the children with the family. And that in this legislation, we're putting in place systems to make it clearer what those things are going to be. But also in this legislation, sir, we're putting in place very clear orders, sir, that allows the Child Care Board, sir, to say very clearly what they're doing. The other thing is this, though. For most of the agencies under the Ministry of People Empowerment, Child Care Board, Welfare, National Disabilities Unit, National Assistance Board, to a lesser extent, gender and HIV. For most of the agencies, social work agencies, you are hardly going to find a professional going on the call-in program to defend themselves. So you're hardly going to find somebody going on the call-in program or writing an article in the newspaper saying, but this is what happened when we intervened. This is what we found. So people will say what they want to say, they take their shots, and the government agencies, sir, will not respond. And oftentimes when you don't respond, people feel that you have done nothing. I say this, I've said it before, sir. In 99% of the cases that people have come to me and asked about in dealing either with children or with poverty or with elderly people or persons with disabilities, they are known to the organizations and in most cases receiving some assistance. But you can't go to the press and say what has happened. So people can comment and say all kinds of things, but you can't come back and say, in the case of Mary Jones from Parliament building, such and such was were the things that were said, and these are what we found in our investigation. This, therefore, is what we've done. You don't normally come to the press and say that. Sir, I suspect going forward there's going to be greater transparency, but at the Child Care Board, like other agencies, are taking a beating. But, sir, for the most part, I would like to think, sir, and I say so, having worked there, and having spent significant time in the ministry, sir, the staff in the Ministry of People Empowerment, sir, and Elder Affairs, sir, that is a good staff, and that they work very, very hard. They work very hard in the interests of people. It is easy, sir, to take pot shots, especially at a man who will not defend himself. But, sir, at the Child Care Board, it's important for us to say, sir, that there are a few things that I really wish to push before this House. For the most part, Child Care Board is dealing with intake, child abuse prevention, adoption and foster care, daycare centers, and residential care. For the most part. It is a wide program, sir, dealing with a number of things. When it comes to child abuse, sir, we are normally talking about physical, sexual, verbal, neglect, and abandonment. Now, people might come and report some of these things and expect that we're going to jump into the person's household, grab the children by the collar, and drag them to safety. But that's not how it works for the most part, sir. There are things that have to be done leading up to it. I do believe that more can be done, and that this legislation allows us to do the more, but that in most cases, sir, you don't just go in and take away people's children. Many people, sir, need support. But I say that this is important, sir, because if you look at the statistics dealing with child abuse, sir, in Barbados, I have the statistics until the end of January this year, and very soon when we return this bill, we would have the more up-to-date statistics. But, sir, between 2019 to 2020, sir, there were 611 reported cases of child abuse in Barbados. Between 2020 and 2021, 544 reported cases of abuse. Between 2021 and 2022, 667 cases reported of abuse. And until January this year, 556 cases, sir. A trajectory that says to me, sir, that I suspect when the numbers come, we'll be at our highest or close to our highest. It is evident, sir, that in Barbados, sir, there's a reported case, sir, of child abuse, sir, almost twice in a day. That is too much. And I also have the view, sir, that we've recently started doing the Child Abuse Awareness Month, sir, and during that month, more people call in than normal, sir, because people, when they get more education, sir, are more likely to call. But the fact is, sir, that at the end of the day, there are too many children in this country who are being abused. Too many. I hold the view, sir, that what we have as reported cases is not even the beginning of the real number of cases in Barbados. There are just too many children in Barbados, sir, who are being abused, sir. And that these statistics, sir, should scare all of us. They should scare all of us. Because it means, sir, that there's a propensity for some people in this country to exercise their own lustful desires in many cases, or other desires, and plant them on children, sir, who are helpless in many cases, and that most of this abuse is done by a person that you know, by a person that you trust, sometimes by a person that you've left, sir, empowered to deal with your children. I made the point the other day, sir, I repeat it now, that if your child is spending time with somebody, know that person. Know that person's circumstances. Because at the end of the day, the first person that should protect the child is the parent or the guardian. You know, we could come here and we could pass 1,000 pieces of legislation. We could follow all the articles in the conventions of the rights of the child. If it is that parents do not do their job, if it is that guardians do not do their job, we still will have many children who are exposed, sir. We have, sir, at the residential facility now, I think nearly about 96 children, give or take a few, who are still in residential care, who are in need of support, sir. And another time, I will talk about foster care and residential care, perhaps a little bit more in depth, but not today. But that the current challenges that we are facing, sir, a lot are due to the limitations in the legislation. Sir, there is a blurring of roles. If you look at the Child Care Board Act, the original one, not the Child Protection Authority that we're talking about, You hear the board should do this and the board should do this, and you don't know if you mean the board of directors or if you mean the child care board, the staff. And if you have an overzealous chairman taking it to mean that the board means the board, then you have boards interfering in the day-to-day affairs of an administration and an institution that they should not be interfering in. I know what I'm talking about. I work for one. I know sometimes, sir, you have chairmen and board members, sir, who get involved in things that they should not get involved in. And, sir, we've separated it. We've made it very clear what the role is for the board in this case and what the role will be for the authority. As part of this conversation, sir, I have brought to the public a conversation, sir, about amalgamation. I genuinely believe that it is in the interest of this country to bring together the Welfare Department, the Child Care Board, the National Assistance Board, and the National Disabilities Unit. This government, sir, has felt that way for a number of years, Honourable Member for St. Lucie. We have felt so for a number of years, that we have to bring together these departments, sir, to be able to offer the best services to people. I feel so strongly. So that if you walk into somebody's house and there's a grandmother who is being neglected because a father or a daughter is never home, and the father or daughter is an alcoholic, that is not good enough for the NAB only to deal with that older person, especially if the house has children. So normally what would happen is that you go and you deal with your person, and the rest of the issues in the household are somebody else's business. You walk into a house where you see an elderly person being abused, and children are in the household, but that's not the remit of this particular organization. When we bring them all together, sir, you deal with the entire family. I believe we will drive better policy that way. We will make greater interventions that way. It will be better change that way. We will service the people of this country better that way. But having this conversation, I can't help but to say, sir, that we've been asking the staff whether they want to, how do you feel about being on the board? And while many of them immediately recognize that it's beneficial to the client class, many feel threatened and challenged because of the way boards have behaved in the past. Some boards, sir, interfering, sir, in whether a person gets a promotion or not. And so we have to get that right. Because it is going to be very important, sir, that we deliver efficiently and effectively to the people in this new organization. We could pass 1 million pieces of legislation. We could build the best architecture in the social services sector on paper. But if we are not implementing properly at the end of the day, because of all kinds of challenges, sir, we will get nowhere. And that, sir, is going to be very important. So we have to be able to separate it, sir. So one of the other things that we've had to address, sir, is the clear guidance on and guidelines on procedures. You should know how long a matter is going to take normally, what those procedures are going to be. People shouldn't come to the Child Care Board and wonder what are the next steps. They should know. They should be itemized. They should know. When A happens, then B. It may not be linear, of course, sir, but they should know. We talk about clear guidelines, sir. That is going to be very important. We also have, sir, and I think in agreement with the Convention of the Rights, but in agreement with Barbadian values, there's often a lack of legal representation for children. It has to change, sir. And children have a right to be heard, sir, at all points during the process. There was an assessment done by UNICEF in 2018, sir, that said that Barbados, in many cases, sir, did not offer that level of participation to the children, that level of legal representation. It has to change. And we discussed this, sir, and we know that there are some elements that we may have to be able to adjust to make it clear, but that the Child Care Board, now the Child Protection Authority, when this is done, must do everything in their power to ensure that children feel they have a right to legal representation in the matters that affect their lives, sir. There is no vulnerable group in this country, sir, that I do not feel has a right, sir, to be heard, sir, that I feel, sir, each organization, each person should be given not only a seat at the table, but when they get there, sir, they should be listened to. And that is how we're going to be able to change this country. Years ago, there was a study by a guy called Sakharopoulos, and he felt at the time that the best education was a primary education, because the world was so based at that time that all you needed was to be able to read and write. You could read and write. That is going to change your circumstances. Sakharopoulos' thinking came to shape much of our social intervention. Give children a primary education and they're good to go. We know, sir, now that a primary education in Barbados is hardly enough. Being able to read and write now is hardly enough. In fact, sir, if you talk to young people, they will tell you CXC is hardly enough. A degree now, hardly enough. The world has changed. And that this idea, sir, that we can just continue to build these structures. And then when you educate a child, you tell a child, sir, once they have the cognitive capacity, obviously, to be able to think effectively for themselves, you educate a child. You give them all the tools. And then you say to that same child, yeah, I understand I educate you. I understand I gave you the capacity to think, but I don't want you thinking. I don't want you to exercise an opinion. Your job is to sit here and just receive. We are asking for our rebellion. And we are seeing it anyhow. There is a social rebellion occurring, sir. And unless we put young people at the table and we listen to them, we have to listen to them. Give them a chance to be heard, sir. Or they will take to social media as their new god. Some of them now have taken to the calling program, surprisingly, and expressing their views because they feel there is no real avenue, no real aperture for them to be able to exercise these views. And it is very important, sir, that we give them that opportunity, sir. I had mentioned before, sir, that this reliance by the Child Care Board on voluntary arrangements, that's difficult. Because if it is that you have to rely on a parent who's abusing the child to give you the authority to deal with the child, then you got a problem. Thank you very much. You have a problem, sir. If you have to wait to be able to deal with a child, sir, by the person volunteering, sir, then you have a problem. And it is going to be challenging, sir. We are asking to be able to address that, sir, and a whole range of interventions. You know, it is also interesting, sir, that we have settled in this bill the definition of a child. Because in the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act, which has no real definition of a child, but it states, specifically, it provides protection from cruelty for children under 16 years of age. This is problematic because the internationally accepted age for a child, for the most part, is 18. But in Barbados, sir, when we treat the children, for the most part, we're talking about a child who's up to 18. And we also know, sir, that there's some other issues that at some point this country has to address. You know, people don't like us to talk about it, but there's going to be a point, sir, where we address this issue. Where in Barbados you can go to a doctor if you have a child of your own, to have your child seen. But if you're 16 years of age, which is the age by which most, I think in the law, I don't know what the proper term, but you would know, sir, but at 16 in Barbados, you are free to be engaged in sexual activity. That's the age of consent. But you cannot go to see a doctor until you're 18. So at 16, you have the right to make that choice for yourself. And if you were, God forbid, to pick up some STD or some other issue associated with that choice, you have to go to a parent or a guardian to be able to see a doctor. We have to bring some balance to that legislation through conversation, of course, but it doesn't help anybody if we bury our heads in the sand. At some point, sir, that lacuna we have to do something about it. And to have that conversation, sir, about it, sir, and bring it. I must also say that is not addressed in this bill, but I'm just putting it out there, sir, because it's one of the things that the young people raised with us, and that they want to have an opportunity, sir, to weigh in on that particular conversation, sir. One of the other things, sir, the big thing in this bill, and I will go through the bill shortly, sir, is the lack of mandatory reporting as it exists now. There is no mandatory reporting, sir. Nobody in Barbados, sir, whether professional or otherwise, is under any responsibility, sir, by law to report a case of abuse. You would hear sometimes a family, sir, where a father is alleged to have children with his children. It even sounds wrong just saying it. A father who has children with his children. You would go through some communities and you would hear them say, well, he do that with all the children. Uncle, daddy. Sir, they know. They may not be a professional, sir, in that capacity, sir, but you might hear a professional who also knows. You might know a parent or a guardian, they know, sir. And because we are talking about protecting the rights of the child, sir, we are talking about protecting the rights of the child. If anybody in this country, as you did, had the opportunity to work at the Child Care Board and saw some of the horrible, thank you so much, and saw some of the horrible things that children had to endure at the hands of people that they should be trusting, that should take care of them, sir. Cases that you would not bring to the fore, sir, but some things that were so egregious, so heinous, sir. They would understand why it is that I feel that this mandatory reporting is important. Now, I understand, of course, some people are going to say, well, you know, there's some people who are dangerous and they will accuse other people, sir. When I get to the legislation, we put in place systems to protect people who make a claim genuinely and then they've made a mistake. If you've done so maliciously, then you have to pay the price for it. And I will explain that in a minute. But I believe this mandatory reporting, sir, is so important. I worked at the Child Care Board for 5 years. And I know of circumstances, sir, where children were made to deal with some things that nobody should have to deal with. People in the household may know. Parents know. And I understand, sir, I'm not an idiot. I know the social circumstances that sometimes, oftentimes, not in all cases, because sometimes women do it too, but in most cases, you might have a man who is in the household, who may be the breadwinner, who controls the natural power dynamics in the household, and who may threaten a woman, well, if you say such and such, I will leave you. That's a matter for him. And really and truly, sir, that is a matter for her. But at the end of the day, we were put in place, sir, to protect the nation's children. And I hope this entire parliament is with me, sir, when we say, by hell or high water, that is what we are going to do to protect the children in this country, sir, who are being abused, sir. Mandatory reporting, sir. The persons that are being asked to report, sir, the duty bearers, we list them. But even if you're not forced to report, sir, I am hopeful that people, as we do more education, as we share more about the responsibilities, sir, as we do more, I hope more people come forward and volunteer that level of information. Because it is going to be important, sir, if we are able, sir, to address and arrest this situation. Sir, as I move on specifically to the proposed child protection bill. This bill, sir, in my mind, is extremely, extremely important. First of all, sir, I made it very clear that there's a patchwork of legislation. You want to be able to intervene on behalf of children, you have to go here, there, and yonder. If you want to do something, sir, to save children from a circumstance that is unfortunate, it's very, very difficult, sir. And we built this bill with the support of the UNICEF. Again, I'm very thankful to be able to have it here before this House. We drafted it on the OECS model bill, but this is not a replica of that model bill. In fact, when we were discussing it, where we think that they had shortcomings, we made sure that we put in. In relation to the Barbadian reality, we made sure that this bill addressed the Barbadian reality, so that this is not some foreign concept being forced under some kind of duress on the interests of the people of Barbados. We've made sure, sir, that the bill, sir, was relevant to things Beijing. I just did a piece, sir, I don't know if you saw it, called Things Beijing. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But that Barbadian values, sir, flow through everything that we do. Barbadian values, sir, must be the reason that we do. So that this bill, sir, though based on that OECS model legislation, is a Barbadian bill that allows us to conform with the Convention of the Rights of the Child. I said that we ratified the convention in 1990, and some 33 years later, many administrations in between, we are now bringing this here to this parliament, sir. This is the most important piece of legislation so far in the social sector that I have seen, sir, since I became the minister. Of course, when we bring the other pieces of legislation, sir, they will also too be equally important. But this, sir, is very, very important. Sir, at the end of the day, sir, when this mandatory reporting, sir, passes and comes into force, sir, it will be a case where I feel that if you know something is occurring, you come forward and you share it. The system for confidentiality must work. It must work. Barbados is too small. If you come forward and you say something, sir, it must work. You know, I find it repugnant. It is repugnant to me that sometimes a person who is in a vulnerable state goes to somebody for help and all kinds of things happen. You go to a man as a woman for help, a man who is in a position of authority, and you have to do a transaction. You have to do all kinds of things to be able to get help. I find that, sir, that's anathema to me. It's repugnant to me. There are also circumstances, sir, where a person goes to a professional institution and they state their business. My circumstances is such and such and such. I might be suffering from this or this. My husband hates me. My woman beats me. Sharing their personal information because they believe that they should be able to trust that institution. And when you violate trust, you could hardly ever get it back. But that you go and you carry your business to the Child Care Board, the Welfare, the Disabilities Unit, National Insurance, the Ministry of Health, the police, anybody, a lawyer, a doctor. And before you get back home properly, your whole business on the street. You go to my constituency office and I hear anything that anybody say about anybody out of my constituency office, they know full well that's the last day on the job. Because trust is so important. And if a person comes forward and reports that they know of a circumstance where this has happened, sir, the person has to be protected. You know, this idea of confidentiality is so important. Now, I don't know what I can do to make sure that that happens all the time, but I can tell you when I find out that it's been violated, there have to be consequences. Because people must feel that they can trust these institutions, sir. And that if you do not have trust in a social service institution, at the end of the day, you have nothing. You have nothing. And I know of circumstances where certain people feel they're disadvantaged. Where we continue, sir, to have to deal with whether people are treated well or not well when they go to certain institutions, we have to fix it. Beyond the idea of just reporting or mandatory reporting, we have to fix it, sir. So there's some key principles that are embodied in this bill. The first of which, sir, and I said very clearly that you must have guiding principles. The first, sir, is that whatever we do must be in the best interest of the child. It must be in the best interest of the child. Now, I've had conversations where persons have said, you know, this could happen, but the parents could be disadvantaged. So this bill is a child protection bill. And whatever we do, sir, must be in the best interest of the child. If you have a child, sir, that feels supported, that feels loved, feels protected, you are going to get the best out of that child. You cannot get enough, you cannot get the most out of a broken vessel. It cannot store anything. It is not rocket science. And whatever we do, sir, must be in the best interest of the child. So the bill speaks to the overarching standard that in every decision contemplated and determined, the safety and the best interest of the child must always come first. The best interest must take priority over an adult's interest or the interest of an organization. The interest of the child. And why is that, sir? Because the child cannot be responsible legally, sir, for itself. And somebody has to step up and take responsibility for our nation's children, sir. And this bill allows us to do that. You know, I've heard people on the other side now emerging after a very long hiatus, like Rip Van Winkle, who slept through the war, and now have a lot of things to say about everything social, and cannot tell me a single serious piece of legislation between 2008 and 2018 brought to this parliament to defend the interests of the most vulnerable. But all of a sudden, people are now waking, like Rip Van Winkle, and have all kinds of things to say. But when we were dealing with COVID, I didn't hear these voices. When we were carrying out vouchers and hampers to feed the poor, I wasn't hearing these voices. All of a sudden, sir, person who once served in the constituency you served in, sir, you serve in now, has everything to say about everything social. And I asked him here from this place to tell me the serious piece of legislation that was brought to this house to defend the interests of the poor, to defend the interests of the vulnerable, whether it be elderly, persons with disabilities, children, sir. Because at the end of the day, sir, that is what we came here to do. And what is in the best interest of the child is what is important. I, sir, have said to myself from the time I came into this place that I do not intend to come and talk politics, because some of these things, sir, ain't got nothing to do with politics. I know when you're hungry, you don't feel hungrier as a DLP than you do as a BLP supporter. When you are hungry, you are hungry. Hunger is universal. When a mother has to listen to her children cry, sir, I can't remember where it was, but I heard a conversation. We were doing some kind of participatory work or canvassing. And the mother, it was in St. John, I think, and the mother was home, sir, and the child was crying. And she said, the child was crying for a while, and she said casually, I think that's just before we came into office, she said very casually, oh, that's how she cries when she is hungry. She knows the different cries. But she can't respond because she had nothing in the house to give the child to eat. I care about those things. And if people want to make this a political platform, we can make it a political platform too. But tell me what you did. At the end of the day, sir, we have to serve in what is in the best interest of the children. That is the priority, sir. The bill makes it clear, sir. And I hope that all of us agree, sir, that in these circumstances, that is the most important thing. The other thing, sir, that we want to be able to say is that principle 2 is that it has to be the least restrictive or intrusive intervention. We have said, sir, the convention suggests, sir, but we know that the family is the best place for any child. None of us would wish to see a child taken from its family. For the most part, we do everything in our power to keep a child with its family. And I've seen people have said, sir, come to me and say, oh, you need to take that child away for what? If you can work, sir, to support the parents, if you can work to support the circumstances, then the least restrictive method would be that the child stays with the family, but that you are giving the support to the primary caregivers from your social service institution to be able to ensure that while that child stays with the family, that child is not exposed to undue harm, sir, of any kind. That, sir, is the second principle that guides this bill. And, sir, it's tied very closely, we know, to the idea that the family is the primary caregiver. That's how we were all socialized. The challenge is that the family in Barbadian society is changing. And when I was young, sir, I wrote a paper. I gave a lecture on the marginalization of young people in Barbadian society. And during the course of that discussion, sir, I made a presentation at St. Michael's Cathedral. And I had argued then that we need to support families because, I was very young at the time, but I said we need to support families because the family remains the primary caregiver. If you can get the family right, a lot of our social problems will be gone. If you can get, I keep telling the Honourable Member for St. John and the Minister of Sports and Community Development, I got that wrong, but Community Development, Youth and Sports, that's it, right? The Honourable Member for St. John, who I think is doing a wonderful job in his ministry, that some of his most important work matches with some of my most important work. I need to get the family right, but we need to get community groups going, community organizations going, the NGO sector powerful. You know, in other societies, sir, there's such powerful NGOs that you could hardly bring a piece of legislation without going through that NGO. They're so powerful. And I think that is important because power should never be located solely or exclusively in any parliament. Power should be located in the hands of the people. We need to get these organizations going. And, sir, once you get those organizations going, sir, you can do a lot better. But I gave a speech, the marginalization of young people in Barbadian society. And it was in the St. Michael's Cathedral. And I gave it was a lunchtime lecture. And I said that the church, because I believe there's a role for the church, sir, call me old-fashioned, I believe there's a role for the church. I believe so very, very strongly, sir. I went to church against my will most of my young life. My mother would send me to St. Mary's Church. Many a Sunday, I crawl on the bus to town, crawl on the bus back home. But I went to church. And even though my ears might have resisted hearing, I heard. And there's some things, sir, that I still carry with me. And I believe, sir, there is a role for the church, as I do that there's a role for strong families, as I do that there's a role for community groups, sir. I would hate to think that on this legislation or any other piece of legislation we find ourselves in a fight with the church or any other group when we both have the same interests. But I made the point then that the church has a responsibility, sir, to be part of this revolution, and that the church must go out and get some of these young people and help us work with them. I was then doing some work with Pinelands Creative Workshop. And I said, the Bible says that the mandate given is to go and make disciples of all men. That's in the Bible. Go out and make disciples of all men. And at the end of that, sir, in the question and answer, we had a conversation. Then when I was finished and I was leaving, the church, the head of the church, I won't call his name, but the person who was in charge of the church at the time, he came to me and he said that was a very good speech, the usual, and that was, you did well and so on, but I disagree with you. Because I do not believe that the church has to go out there and try to save anybody. He said to me, the church is here, in town. And if the people want saving, they will come to the church. The church doesn't have a right going out there to save anybody. Now, I know, sir, that may have been the case where people were flocking to the church. But it has become apparent to me that in a lot of our traditional churches, we are not getting the level of young people, sir, and that we still have a responsibility, all of us, to go out and try to engage the young society, sir, to be able to say that we have done our best. Because Barbados does not belong to one class of people. And Bob Marley sings, sir, when the rain falls, it don't fall on one man whole stop. When those problems come to bear, when they come home to roost, they say the chickens always come home to roost. When those problems come back, sir, they're not going to avoid the church. They're not going to avoid the community groups. I also ask, sir, for parents to get involved in their parent staff associations, the parent teachers associations. Because when these problems come home, they're coming back to all of us. I see people commenting very casually on social media when children are fighting on the road. They want beaten or who children them is. They're our children, though. They're yours and they're mine. They're our children. And all of us have a responsibility, sir, to be able to bring our children, sir, to some kind of understanding, sir, but to give them the tools. And that the natural things that existed in Barbadian society, sir, the things that we took for granted, sir, the institutions that were the pillars of our society, we've watched them decay over time. And if we continue to sit back and say, well, it's not my issue and somebody else can deal with it, sir, then we will lose a whole generation of children and their potential along the way. It's really, sir, important, sir, that we try to keep the families together. That is why I feel that is perhaps some of the most important work. And so when we pass this new bill and people say, what has the Child Care Board done? You say, well, we kept the family together. And that in itself is a win. Because people feel you've not done anything unless you take away the child. And that's not always going to be the case, sir. I made the point, sir, about Principle 3, that the participatory role of the child is very important. And children need to have a voice, sir, to be able to participate. So it's all through the bill. But if a child has sufficient maturity, that a child should be allowed to express their own views. And that we guarantee genuine participation on this bill, sir. When I was a student, I remember there used to be a framework for participation. They had intensities of participation. So you could say you participated if I told you. I could say I told you what it is, and then write that you've participated, which is the lowest level intensity of participation. I could have said, come and read this thing, you read it, I don't want to hear what you got to say, but you participated. What we're saying here, sir, is the highest intensity of genuine participation. That means, sir, that children's views are taken very seriously and that they're involved in decision making. When we met, sir, in our ministry with the young people of this country, they told us that they wanted to be involved, that they wanted genuine participation. So what are some of these benefits of this proposed bill? We know, sir, that there's going to be a creation of a child protection authority. The Child Care Board must focus its duties on protecting children. Children, protection of children has to be the highest responsibility now of the Child Care Board. And we also have the view, sir, that because of the new and the range of interventions, and also because of the work that the board is doing now to bring more attention to children's issues, that they're going to be likely to be an increase in cases. We expect that there's going to be an increase in cases, sir, and usage by the Child Protection Authority. This bill, sir, is going to see us dealing with children much more frequently because we've put in place the tools to be able to do so, to protect them from harm. We've also laid out, sir, what are going to be the procedural requirements for every stage in the process. People need to know. You know, we said, sir, that you can't go to the Child Care Board and then it takes forever. You know, when I worked for the Canadian government and I received, everything is paperless, really. So you'd get a file sent to you by email, or we had a system called EDRMS. You get this file, sir, and based on what you have to do, it will tell you you got to report on this thing in 2 days, 3 days. And you see when that second day or that third day comes, you get a warning, you get a reminder. Remember that this is supposed to be submitted by X date. Because you have to be accountable. A man comes and reports something to one of our institutions, sir, and hears nothing about it. You ask a question, sometimes you can't find the file, sir, and not only in child care or welfare, all over government. You go and you make a case, sir, you know, you go to the hospital sometimes and then they say they can't find your file. I mean, you must have heard that. People say you can't find the file, sir. These things are crazy. But if you can't find the file, sir, it means that, you know, nothing will happen. Or that people have this idea that you're working very hard when you have 1,000 files on your desk. And some of us, sir, have gotten very good at keeping files on our desk. Because it looks like you're working hard. You walk into a room, you see bare files on a desk, pile up. I don't keep files. My secretary would tell you I respond fast. I don't keep files. PS would tell you, I don't keep files. Come to me as soon as they say it's in it, pop. Message me at 2, message you back at 2:02 in the morning. But at the end of the day, sir, this idea, sir, that you can just have a thing ad infinitum, you know, you send it to me, I'm going to respond to you. That has to change. If you want to build trust in the organization, sir, it has to change, sir. And we set out some very clear timelines for most of these things. There has to be a child rights-based approach, sir. That is the international best standard, but it is also what we value in Barbados. What, sir, is the child rights-based approach? At the end of the day, sir, I think this is important, sir. It is enshrined, really, in our Constitution, pretty much, that you have a right. But that right, sir, must be made clear, sir, as it does here. And a whole range of new orders that we've laid out, a whole range. A whole range. So you can go to court and you can get a whole set of things very clearly laid out, sir, that you can do, sir. That does not mean you have to take the child away from the household. And we do not want to be able to say, sir, that every case has resulted in a child being removed from its household, sir. So, sir, what is this nexus between the Child Protection Bill and the Child Justice Bill? And I will only hint at this today because the minister with responsibility for children's issues, sir, and justice, the Honourable Minister responsible for information will deal with this next week in more detail, I'm sure. But, sir, there is a case now where children sometimes come in conflict with the law. A child over 12, when he comes into conflict with the law, sir, will normally find himself before the justice system. Many of the children that we've come to find, sir, who were before the justice system were there, sir, for what we call these refractory, sometimes, issues, wandering and other refractory issues. That has already been struck down by the court, so I don't need to discuss that, and Minister Abrams will probably speak to that. But when you check it, sir, a lot of the children who were before these institutions, sorry, I should not say minister, the Honourable Minister responsible for information, I apologize, sir. But when we look at it, sir, a lot of these children who are there are also dealing with abuse themselves. And that what you see manifesting and what people write off, you are a rebel. In colloquial terms, sir, men and other people describe young girls as whatless. I was stopped leaving the supermarket the other day, and a girl who laid out her whole life for me told me that she was abused as a child for the time she could remember herself. She got pregnant early, I think like 13 or so, but she got pregnant early. But she was abused from the time she knows herself. Her whole family, some of whom knew what was happening with her, calling the young lady whatless. All over the streets, this is a whatless girl. She was abused, sir. We see some of these cases, sir, and we assume, sir, that a person who's being deviant just is we used to call in Barbados hard ears. You may not even be getting the food when the day comes. You can hardly think. We were at the justice consultation the other day, sir, the Honourable Attorney General and the Minister of State in that ministry and others. And a Trinidadian judge, sir, laid out very clearly a case, sir, of a young person in Trinidad who was suspended, I think, from school or expelled. Because when he was in that situation, a teacher came up to him, his head is on the desk, sir, his head is on the desk. The teacher comes up to him and they have a mild confrontation in the classroom. Get him out of school, he's a rebel. When the circumstances came to be known, sir, as said by the judge, it was a case where the night before, that boy's father had beat his mother to the point where she had to be hospitalized. Hit her over the head with a saucepan or a frying pan, sir, that was so heavy, some kind of pot, resulting in the mother being hospitalized. The brother of that child decided to intervene to help his mother and found himself getting damaged too in the process. The police then comes, so the mother has to go to the hospital, the brother has to go to the hospital. The police then comes and takes away the father, so that child now has to fend for himself. He was 13 or so? Has to fend for himself. He goes to school, he had nothing to eat in the morning, he witnessed his mother get brutalized the night before, police drag away his father, he didn't sleep, he's resting his head on the desk, has a slight altercation with the teacher, expelled from school, and the circumstances that led him to be there, sir, were nothing of his own doing. But they found that out afterwards, sir. I know that teaching is a very, very difficult time now. It's a difficult exercise, sir. I have, in my own experience, sir, a teacher who I thank all the time, allow me to say, Miss Wendy Griffith Watson, who would always come and check on me, sir. You're too bright, Kirk Humphrey, to get into much trouble. Trouble was my middle name. They used to tell me that I spent more time by the head teacher than I did in my classroom. But at the end of the day, sir, sometimes you need, and I know teachers, sir, are stretched. And there's some good teachers in the system, sir. Excellent teachers in the system. But dealing with some very difficult circumstances. Now, she's there to teach, so she's doing her job. But that child, sir, came there, sir, with other issues. If that child had got up and hit the teacher, or had gone and hit another child, that child would have been sent, in our existing legislation, to government industrial schools. But is that the kind of intervention that we want for that child? Is that what is in the best interest of the child? And the answer, sir, would have to be no. And that is why, sir, we have to look at the legislation, sir. We've joined the two bills, and we've put in place a system, sir, where you could, at different points, you can divert from the justice system into the protection system. But I will leave that there, sir, because that is a conversation for another time. And we've abolished, sir, the status offenses, sir, so that you can't go to these institutions for wandering and so on, sir. We've abolished those things. We've made it clear, sir, in that legislation. Sir, currently now in Barbados, if a child under 12 commits an offense, what do you do for that child? It's not very clear. Our legislation makes it clear that a child that commits a serious offense, not capital, who is under 12 years old, sir, would now go to what we call a secure treatment facility, protecting that child. Because a child under 12, by law, is said to not be able to commit a crime, not criminally culpable. So that child goes to a secure treatment facility, sir, where that child could get the level of help that it needs, sir. And hopefully, the level of rehabilitation that it may need, sir. But that is something in the legislation that we have to be able to address. And so there are a number of tools, sir, that are in this bill that we have to be able, sir, to address, sir. Sir, we also spoke very clearly in this bill, sir, of a number of other things. I will leave some of them out for the purposes of this conversation because I suspect that we will be here again in a few weeks having this discussion. But there are a number of details that I will leave out. So, but in summary, what does our bill do? Sir, of course, it recognizes that the government has a responsibility to safeguard and advance the interests of children. That is part of our own undertaking. We've set out, sir, in the interpretation section, sir, a very clear definition, sir, and all kinds of definitions of what are associated with children. Very clearly set out. We set out terms that are new: care responsibility, delegated care responsibility, parental responsibility, things that are now going to be before the Child Care Board as part of their arsenal to be able to use when they're having these issues, sir. We set out issues like cyber abuse, because we know, sir, that children now are being abused online. We've made it very clear that grooming a child is also abuse. Because you know there are men, sir, who wait for children, sir. In Barbados, they used to say 11 and ready. After 12 is lunch. If you could sit on the toilet and your foot touch the ground, you're ready. All kind of things, sir, that we justified in communities. Grooming children, just waiting. I've heard some other terms I won't use in here, sir. But the grooming children, so we're going after them. Because this bill has to be able to protect children. So we've laid out the bill very clearly, sir. What are the definitions? Sir, what is in the best interest of the child, sir, is throughout this bill, sir. We've tied it, and we say very clearly that this section establishes that this act is meant to comply with both the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international instruments. We've agreed. Most of these things we were agreed to long before, but we hadn't put them into our legislation. So yes, we are agreed. Specific mention is made, sir, of where appropriate preserving the family unit. It is throughout this legislation. So at the end of the day, sir, the bill lays out very clearly what the issues are. Section 4 articulates the principles which must be applied in the administration of the Act. Sir, at Section 5, and I think for anybody who takes a glance at this bill, who has an interest in child protection, for those who will come before the Select Committee when we go there, they should take a look at Section 5. Because Section 5 lays out, sir, for the most part, an expansive list of grounds under which a child may be deemed to be in need of care and protection. And it has created a number of entry points into the legislation that allows us, sir, to have a wider focus than the OECS bill. So that in Section 5, sir, we have listed a number of things. So that we can say this child is in need of care and protection if it needs this, or this, or this, or this, or this, giving the Child Care Board the capacity now to respond to a number of things that they could not potentially respond to. And sir, because we've laid out so many other things, unless we are coming here to make mock sport at people, then the Child Care Board would obviously need to have, well, the Child Protection Authority would obviously need to have more staff. They would obviously need to have more staff. They would have to have the appropriate staff. They would have to have people who are skilled in the appropriate areas, or this bill would just be on paper. It would just be on paper. It wouldn't even be worth the paper on which we have written all these very good things. You have to give the board, sir, more staff if you're going to give them more responsibility. Or you would find a case there where, I want people to respond in 24 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours in some cases, but you don't give them staff, you're wasting time. And we know, sir, that some of the Child Care Board staff was already overburdened. I remember, I don't even know if you should say this, when I was at Child Care Board on Christmas. Well, on Christmas, an officer said, manager then, come on, let me take you around. I have to carry some hampers to my most desperate families. He said to me, this is a true story. He said, it's Christmas, I'm going to take hampers to my most desperate families. He worked the city, honorable member. So he was taking me to the 5 most desperate cases in the city. And Child Care Board was in town, so we didn't have far to go. At every single house he rambled. Every house. We did not leave Child Care Board and went straight to a house. We did not leave that house and visited the other house. I asked him, how could these be your most desperate cases? You don't even know where they live. Well, I would imagine if a case is your most desperate case, you have to know where they live, or you should. But he told me that he was under so much pressure with the amount of cases that he was dealing with, similar to welfare, that he didn't have the opportunity to visit his most desperate cases often. So unless we give the staff at Child Care Board some support by human resources, when we give them all these extra responsibilities, sir, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to do their job. And sir, that is going to be critically important. And we've listed out a whole set of things, sir. I mean, there's so many grounds for intervention. And all of these grounds, I should say, meet with international standards. But they also meet with Barbadian standards. I would advise people, some people will run to the press and say that we've done this or that we've done that. Take a read of the bill. Go and take a read of the bill. Read in particular Section 5 if you don't have time to read all other parts of the bill, and just see what it is that we are trying to do. If you have a chance, look at between section, I think between 32 and 50, where all the care orders are listed, to see that what we are trying desperately to keep families together. And look and see what we're saying the Child Care Board must be able to do, sir. So section 24, sir, section 9, sorry, sir, speaks to the participatory role, but I've said that. Section 24 to 27 speaks about mandatory reporting. It lays it out very clearly, sir. Section 24 lists the duty bearers. Sir, if you're not sure that you, by virtue of this legislation, now have to report a case that you may think, in your opinion, might be as a result of child abuse. Because we're not asking anybody to go and look at somebody and say you've been abused. That's not what the legislation says. But it has to be that in your professional judgment, you think something is wrong with this child, and that the professionals, the Child Protection Authority, should get involved and investigate and see if indeed this child has been abused. If you look, sir, between 24 to 27, it will tell you, sir, if you are one of these persons for whom mandatory reporting relate. If you are a doctor that comes into contact with some of this information, sir, you are a person, sir, who goes through cell phones. You know, back they don't do it as much now, but you'd have to take your mobile phone to a man who would take your information, put it on his computer, fix your phone, and then put your information back on your phone. Now, that man got all your information. Many people like to take all kinds of selfies and other things. But if you are that man, and you see a child in a position that is clearly a case where that child is being abused, then you also have a responsibility to be able to report it, sir. So the people who are due to report, sir, it is listed, sir. Subsection 2 states that it is guilty of that same section, section 24, that a person is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $20,000 or to a term of imprisonment of 2 years or both if they fail to comply. So if you're one of those persons for whom mandatory reporting applies, and you see something and you fail in the investigation, you fail to report it, then you could potentially be liable under summary conviction. And a person, sir, this is very important, I made it earlier, but this is where it is written. A person who makes a report in good faith that turns out not to be true is not liable to prosecution. So if you, in good faith, make a report, so because we're trying to protect the children, I remember a conversation that we had very recently, all of us, where the question was raised, what happens in the case where a report is done and it damages the person? And we said, sir, that you have to uphold, sir, the child. What is in the best interest of the child? And what is it that we are trying to solve, sir? What is the mischief? And so if you make a report, sir, I am encouraging people now, sir, who are duty bearers, to make such a report. If they do so in good faith, the law protects them. However, a person who makes a false report or provides false or misleading information is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to a term of imprisonment of 1 year or both. Sir, if you look at the current pieces of legislation, I don't even have them now, but you look at the fines that were available, in the current legislation, they're a joke. They're a joke. $500, in some cases $44. Like, these fines are a joke. And why are they a joke? Because the legislation is old. and that nobody has taken the time, sir, to go through very thoroughly what the legislation says and to make, sir, try to right a wrong. This bill, sir, will right a wrong. So it says very clearly, sir, that that person is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to a term of imprisonment of 1 year or both. So don't risk. Don't try to damage a person because you're trying to damage a person. Don't risk. Don't go and cast aspersions on a man's character because you're trying to cast aspersions. Do not risk. Because at the end of the day, sir, Barbados is so small. And the point was made, sir, while we were having this conversation, that when a man's character is stained in Barbados, it is almost impossible to get it unstained. When somebody says something about you, sir, it's very difficult. I mean, a man like go a lie, that thing's going around the country. In quick time, you let go of the lie, and then you see forwarded many times. It comes back forwarded many times. It gone all over Barbados, forwarded many times. You sit down and you do a response and nobody is forwarding your message. Nobody is interested in that. People are interested in the salacious. But I'm telling you that if you go, sir, and you malign a man or a woman, and I say man, sir, even though in these gender-sensitive times, that's probably not appropriate, but I meant it to cover both. But if you malign a man or a woman or anybody, sir, with a false accusation, sir, the bill addresses that very clearly, sir. And we've set out the protocol, sir, and I know the director and the child care board now must sit with the different agencies and work out the protocols for reporting. Because when we met with the police, they made it clear that they had some issues in terms of how would these work. The nurses also, sir. So in subsidiary legislation, we're going to bring the protocols. But that we have to sit down and iron out the protocols by which this mandatory reporting should occur, sir. And I think before we are able to do so, it's going to require intense training. The Child Care Board and all the other agencies must involve themselves in intense training of all the persons who are involved in this. You want to be able to say, sir, that the nurses understand, the doctors understand. The last thing that I think we should do in this or any bill is to use these fines and penalties, sir, as our first point of action. In most cases, fines and penalties should be your last recourse, so that you try to work with people to make sure that they understand what their duties are and to make sure that they're comfortable with it. And also to be sure, sir, that I'm pretty sure that a doctor or a lawyer, because the legislation also says that when you report under this legislation, you're not violating any professional ethics. But they would be disheartened if they report something and it is said that the doctor says so or that the body says so, and then it's all over the place. And then that doctor loses the doctor's credibility. So we have to protect our professionals too, so that the professionalism, the immunity is going to be important, the confidentiality is going to be important, that protocol, Director, but that protocol, sir, is very important. And that has to be one of the priorities now of the Child Protection Agency or the board. Because, sir, we want professionals to feel comfortable reporting, sir. In many places, sir, a child goes to a doctor with a broken hand. The first person they call is the Child Protection Agency. That's standard. You have to explain if it was an accident or if it was not an accident. And you allow the professionals to be able to make that assessment. Because at the end of the day, sir, it is the professionals who will determine whether it is abuse or not, sir. We have, sir, listed a whole set of things, sir, and we've said that in the legislation that nobody could imitate, personate, or any of those things, sir, the persons in the Child Protection Agency, sir. But the Section 28 mandates the director to conduct an investigation and assessment. You have to go in. Once this thing is reported, sir, they don't have a choice. And there are timelines set in the legislation by which the Child Protection Agency must report. Somebody says, especially in their professional capacity, that a child may be abused, but at whatever the circumstances, it causes them some concern. They have to go in, they have to do an intervention, sir. The request for the intervention is detailed under Section 23. And then they have to go in and they have to do that investigation. So you cannot, and they have to report it and they have to record it. Because there are people in this country who say that they go to the child care board and that they make a report and that they don't know what happens with the report. It cannot work. If a report has been made to the child care board under this new legislation in protecting the best interests of the child, they have to investigate and they have to do a report. And it improves the transparency, the accountability, sir, and the best interest of the child. So this best interest principle doesn't just apply to people outside of the new Child Protection Agency. The best interest of the child applies to the Child Protection Agency too. They have to put themselves in a position, sir, where they can report on what are the issues as a result of that report, sir. Many teachers would tell you that they feel a sense of discomfort. They don't know sometimes who to call. Teachers have said during our consultation that they've called people, got no response, nobody came. And teachers, sir, are going to be like the first responders because teachers often see abuse before other people. The child care board staff will tell you that during COVID, they did not get the same level of reports because school was out. In fact, I remember a conversation with the current deputy director who said to me that when the school is out, that we're likely to get more reports. And true to form, when school came back in, more reports. The children will go to school, sir, and they will talk to their friends. A child who is normally engaging in class may not engage in class. A child, sir, may come to class limping, bruised. Teachers see. All of a sudden, the child's head is on the desk at the child in the case that I spoke of. Teachers know. But you cannot ask a teacher to do this, and then you jeopardize that teacher too. Because teachers have I have so much respect for teachers. So much respect for teachers. I have so much respect for my staff. And everybody is busy. But at the end of the day, sir, this legislation is child protection. And so we have to make sure that the teachers are in a position to be able to report this abuse, sir, in a way that is safe, that does not violate trust. If you go and you report child abuse to a teacher, and you hear mom, all of a sudden it's all over the street that mom reported on such and such, which other child going to that teacher? Because then you violate that sacred trust, that sacred relationship between the teacher and the child, sir. And therefore, we have to, all of those people that we list as duty bearers, we have a responsibility, sir, to be able to protect all of those children. So the responsibility for reporting, recording, and getting back to the people is on the Child Protection Authority, sir. That's going to be very important, sir. This bill speaks of emergency removal. I remember during the conversations that we were having, sir, one of the things that was perhaps the most contentious was whether the Child Care Board or the Child Protection Authority should have the responsibility to go in and remove a child in an emergency situation without going to court. You will be surprised, sir, of the amount of conversations that we had on this one alone. In fact, sir, the public will hear me talking about this and think that we just get here, you know. Every single line in this legislation was subjected to all kinds of scrutiny. But that particular piece of legislation, sir, section in the legislation, had so much conversation. You know, this is emergency powers, sir. I remember a conversation, sir, with the Honourable Member for St. Michael Central, who told me at his time as a social worker, he remembered a case, sir, where he visited a client, sir, and the mother was, hanging the child on something or something to that effect, like a real case of abuse. I had to remove the child immediately. There are cases, sir, where you don't have time to run to the court. You don't have time to go and say, I need a court order. By the time you come back, the child is either badly damaged or that the child is dead. And this legislation, so we fought for this particular piece because I know it made some people uncomfortable. And the reason I think is because some people still don't have the necessary trust in the child protection agencies. And all that we've done here in the best interest of the child's participation is all about accountability and transparency. There has to be a new ethos. There has to be a new way of doing business, sir. We have to be able to hold ourselves up, sir, as champions of children. And that, sir, is going to be important. But in this legislation, sir, in this case, on emergency removal on Section 31, Even though the director has the power to remove a child without the authority, the legislation says that the director must, within 24 hours, and these are strict timelines, apply to the court for an order. So after you remove the child, your duties don't stand in there, go to court and get the necessary order. But that you have the authority to act and to act within the ambit of the law, sir. At the end of the day, sir, this is an improvement from the prior practice, and it continues to allow the director to act with haste in urgent circumstances, sir. Because some social workers would and some social workers wouldn't, you know, unless they're very, very clear, sir. We also spoke about the police, and that you would go, sir. There was also a discussion we had as to whether the law should say you can only remove a child with the police. And, sir, this was a serious conversation. And now the law allows you to remove that child with or without the police. And, of course, when we met with the police, sir, it was because the officers often find, if you're going to removing a child from a household, sir, don't blame the officers, because if you're going to remove a child from a household, you could bat a mother, a father, a brother, a dog. I mean, people got to stop that thing too. All those who work in social work agencies, many officers of the Child Care Board will tell you, people used to let go of dogs. You see the officer come in, you release your dog. All kind of things on people who are executing their duties. This legislation protects the officers too. But at the end of the day, sir, it is going to be important, sir, that when we remove a child, that we remove a child safely. So when we met with the police officers, sir, we discussed it, and the police have said that once we give them the necessary training, we build that relationship, sir, they're willing to work with the Child Care Board. They're willing to work with the Child Protection Agency. I commend the police officers, sir. I commend the Royal Barbados, not sorry, is this a Royal? The Barbados Police Service, who are doing a good job, sir. They're doing a good job under some very difficult circumstances. I heard while I was in St. Michael Northwest very recently with the Honourable Member for the City and the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest, and a person who some would say, sir, shouldn't have said what he said, sir, because, you know, people associate him with all kind of other things, and in many ways, sir, so much wisdom. But he said to me, sir, the police are just driven by, he said the police in Barbados today is earning their pay. He said the police today, you can't say that the police today ain't working, that the police earning their pay. And he's a man, sir, that oftentimes the police will be troubling him. And he said that the police in Barbados today earning the pay. So I know that the Barbados police force is working. But they said to us, sir, you know what I liked about this bill? Is that everybody who came to the table, sir, understood that they had to act in the interest of the children. Nobody came with any airs or any ego, sir. When I reached out to UNICEF and I said I want to do this thing, in fact, I didn't reach out originally, you know. When I started drafting this bill, I went to the person who I asked to draft it with me, and then UNICEF reached out to me and said, let us work together on this bill because we'd had a relationship. And with their intervention, sir, again, no airs, no egos, no puff-upness, no haughtiness. Everybody come in at the table humble to be able to do what they must do in the service of the nation's children, sir. The police very humble. They said we don't understand in some cases what it is that the board requires of us, and that we would like greater guidelines and greater guidance sometimes. And I believe, sir, half of the problems that we have happen because we don't have relationship. I believe that the director of the Child Care Board must have a relationship with the Chief Education Officer. I believe that they don't. I couldn't understand how they can't. And I know that they have one. But that these things must happen, sir. Relationship will get much more done than the law. You know, if you can build relationships, you will get a lot more work done than if it is just written into the law or into the legislation, sir. And that is why I think these relationships are important. We've set up a whole set of committees, sir. Last week, Friday, we are building a team, so we brought together Child Care Board, Welfare, National Assistance Board, National Disabilities Unit for the amalgamation. We could amalgamate the social services sector easy. I could do it on paper, bring the simple legislation. By the end of the day, when this thing is passed, they're now the Family Services Department. Amalgamation for all intents and purposes, sir, with no usefulness. And I could do that, sir, but that wouldn't work because you have to have relationship. If you're serious about protecting the nation's children, you have to have relationships. So we brought together all of these persons last week, Friday. And we had a fun time in the Botanical Gardens, a time from which I must tell you I am now recovering. Because my honorable friend, my good friend, the permanent secretary, decided to run a race against me.
All I remember, I have been told about it. About the catastrophe that ensued.
Yes, sir. Denied me of my glory. Yeah. Most people didn't see on the video when he tripped me. Yeah, he put his foot up. But anyway, sir, we brought together all of these agencies, sir, and we had a good time. And we had a fun time, but at the end of the day, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas obviously she was there. I'm very much involved in all we do in the ministry. But when we left, I think the value in the amalgamation, they understood it better. Sir, I am committed to bringing this ministry together if it kills me. If it kills me. Because I know, sir, that unless we do it as one, we're not doing anything. If it is that you go to the house and a child is being abused, but you leave the hungry grandmother, or if you look and you see that the house is falling apart, and you just deal with one thing, I know that we ain't doing anything. My staff would tell you that I bring them to all kinds of meetings. I bring staff who are responsible for children to meetings on welfare. Staff who are responsible for welfare to meetings on national assistance. Because when the Family Services Department comes, it's going to be one department. And everybody's going to be responsible. They don't know, the director doesn't know necessarily that they're going to be responsible for that directorate. They might be one who's responsible for one thing, maybe dealing with something else when the whole thing happens. And that this idea, sir, that we can continue to work in silos, sir, is an error. And if we think we can work in silos in this country, that too is an error. If we think we can celebrate when something goes wrong in the Ministry of Health because it's not me, that's an error. All of us have to lift our game. All of us have to lift our game. The country depends on all of us lifting our game, sir. I don't celebrate, sir. When something goes wrong. I think the German word is Schadenfreude. It only exists in German. Not surprising. But it is a word, sir, where you kind of like celebrate at somebody else's challenges. Schadenfreude. Look it up. You know it, right? So that does not exist even in my mind because, sir, I feel that everybody has, or have, everyone must, that's a better phrase to be sure, work together at the end of the day, because if it is that we work in silos, sir, who are we really serving? Unless we're serving ourselves. Do you go to work, sir, to serve yourself? I am sure the answer to that is no. We can't go to work to serve ourselves, sir. I was looking back at videos of us just the other day because in 5 years, in a few days, it's going to be 5 years that we were elected. And I was looking back at videos of all of us 5 years ago. You don't see how you're aging is all I can say. But I was looking back at most of us 5 years ago, and these last 5 years have been hard, clearly. I look at pictures of me and I'm like, whoa, what happened to you? Something happened, but I know that is because we are working very hard. Sir, all of us are working very hard because you're not working in your own name. You know, somebody remarked recently that I go in gray when I let it happen. Modern science allows me to be black when I want to be black too. But at the end of the day, sir, all of us are working very hard. So because we can't work in silos, and we have to be able to serve the nation's children, sir. And that is why, sir, I began by talking about the emergency removal, sir, and all of us being able to work together to do it. Police, the nurses, the doctors, the teachers, everybody. Sir, between Section 32 and 50, we've listed a whole range of care and protection orders. Because the convention says, our international standards says, but more importantly, Barbadian values say that the priority must be to keep a child with the family. So you have a whole range of interventions before you actually take a child away from its house. A whole range. The court now has a whole range of options. We're now making it easier on the court, sir. And if there's one thing that has gutted me, and you, I'm sure, sir, it's because you will see a child go to court or be abused at 8 years old. The incident, all the attorneys in this place, so the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East, the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, they all know it. You will see a child happen, the doctors know it too. Abuse happens at 8, the pharmacists, everybody. That case takes so long to be heard. A judge called me one day after he heard me say this, sir, and said to me that up to now, there is a particular case that haunts him because when this child turned 18, it still had not been settled and it occurred 10 years prior. Because our justice system sometimes moves slowly, we have to make it easier for the courts to be able to do their job too. But that's sometimes what you see, sir, at 18. So a child comes back, and remember the lady that I told you spoke to me outside the supermarket. You get abused at 8 or 5 or 4. By the time you finally come to court, sir, for everybody to see, really, I don't know that we've been doing in camera hearings, are we now? I'm not so sure. But by the time you come to court, sir, as a person, 15, 16, 17, I heard somebody say the girl had so much tattoos. Look at how she dressed. You go on her Instagram, you cast in judgment not on the 8-year-old child that got abused. You are casting judgment on what you perceive to be the person who is 16, 17, 18, who is standing before you, sir, as a manifestation of all of the horrors that they had to endure, of a system that has failed them, because there's no way 10 years later that case should be unresolved, sir. And then they have to go and tell that story. And many people can't deal with it. And, sir, they don't see the victim. And I'm saying to you, sir, to Barbados through you, sir, sorry, that at the end of the day, sir, what haunts me is not that we see the child as whatever we see the child as, sir, but what it is that we are carrying that allow us to think that way about other people. You see somebody, you cast judgment on them immediately. Some of the most intelligent people I know never went to university yet. Ain't got a degree to the name. Will never speak in this place. Some of the most intelligent people I know are being judged by people who have those degrees. Who cannot, sir, look objectively on situations, sir, and say that this person deserves X or X. That is the society that we've created. I'm not frowning on people who have degrees because they went to school, of course. Everybody wants better for themselves, but that should not become the tool that we use to gauge whether a person has value or not. You see a child who you know has been abused, because the child is there for an abuse case. And you cast your own judgments on the child because the child has not come out, sir, in the way that we've been told the child should behave. When that child was abused, sir, and the system has failed that child, this legislation, sir, will try its best to make sure that that does not happen. And I know the Honourable Member for St. Joseph is doing what he must with the courts to make sure that does not happen. That is why we must all work together, sir. I fear that in the current iteration or manifestation of what we have, that children who are abused, sir, who are victims, are made to feel as if they're guilty of something, so you blame the victim for being the victim. That is not child protection. That is not putting the rights of the child first. That is not who we are, sir. And that is why this legislation must come before this House, sir, and deal with these very serious issues. And, sir, between section 37 to 39, sir, we discussed these care plans. What should a social worker do to make sure that the child has the benefit of the best of a society, sir? In current thinking, I think if a child goes before government industrial schools, they have a minimum now of 3 years, I think. And we are saying in our legislation, if you have to go to a secure treatment facility, and I want to make this very clear, the secure treatment facility is not a punishment. Okay, you're not going to go to the secure treatment facility in this legislation to punish anybody. It's about care and protection. It's listed in Section 5. So that if it is in the estimation of the director of the Child Protection Agency or authority that this child needs care and protection by virtue of their own examination, then that child, if the circumstances allow, could benefit from being in a secure treatment facility. It is not we are not creating another version of government industrial schools. It is not a case where a child is being punished. In fact, this is a case where a child is being helped. That we determine that this child could benefit from that, sir, but based on the interactions, based on the conversation, based on conversations with the child too. And that you can go to a secure treatment facility, sir, to be helped. Because we know, sir, that there are some children, sir, who should not be in, let me say dogs casually, but who should not be in government industrial schools. And we know that there are some children, sir, who should not be put in the child care board too. Because sometimes the court sends children to the child care board because that's the facility that exists, but they shouldn't be there either. They need something else. And this is that middle ground, sir, but it is in this legislation because it is not about child justice, it is about care and protection of the child. So that when you are going to a secure treatment facility, you're not going there because you've done something wrong. I want to make it very clear. You're not punishing anybody. You go to a secure treatment facility because that is what we believe is the best place to help you. And only in circumstances where the director has made that her judgment, not me, not a mother who fears that her child has suddenly started seeing a boy, as they did when I was young, and say, you got to go to Somerville. This is not that. That the director in her assessment must determine that she thinks it is in the best interest of the child to have the benefit of a secure treatment facility. That, sir, is the complete difference, sir. And we are saying that that child in the secure treatment facility cannot be there for more than 3 years, but that every 90 days, every 3 months, it is mandatory that a review is done. So that the child ain't lost way in the system. We got children now, some of them that feel like they lost way in the system. You know, we made it clear that parents should be able to come and visit their children. There are children who are staying now in the Marina Brewster facility at Fire, sir. You know, children who are there, sir, and the parents don't come, sir. The child care board, sir, I'm sure would encourage many cases for parents to have responsibility, relationships with their children. This legislation works on making sure that you have a relationship. Because when you go back into the society, sir, you have to have a relationship with your family, hopefully. So it's about building relationships, sir, to make sure that at the end of the day, sir, we maintain that relationship. This section, Section 39, specifically reflects the ethos of the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, sir. The principle of best interest of the child. And it can be served by reunification, sir, under this legislation. But more than that, sir, it reflects the best interest by Barbadian standards. What is going to be important for Barbados? Sir. And therefore, sir, it is going to be important for us, sir, that as we do this legislation, sir, that we continue to maintain, sir, what is in the best interest of the child. And the best interest of the child, sir, must be that it stays with its family. I have, sir, visited some of these homes, sir. We've been encouraging fostering, you know. We ask people to come and foster children. We want to encourage fostering of children, sir, because children need a role model. We went down to Nightingale Home the other day, sir. I hate to pick on the permanent secretary. But when we were there, sir, children drawn to the permanent secretary. I'm hearing him now telling me about fostering children. I hope he follows through. I hope he follows through, sir, because I think he would be a good mentor, is all I would say, sir. I think he would be a good mentor for children. But I think there are many men in Barbados who would be good mentors for children. Of course, you have to make sure that you do your filtering, because some people want to pop up. You know, pedophiles know where to find children, play parks, foster system, that kind of thing. So you have to make the 1,000 Family program that we're about to launch. People, you know, they know where to find children. And so we have to make sure that we do the necessary filtering to make sure we could filter out people who come into, able to feed their harmful desires, sir. But is it in the best interest of the child, sir? So that every 90 days, sir, a review. So that nobody is lost away in the system, sir. And that is going to be very, very important, sir. Our supervision order allows in the new Child Protection Agency that situation to occur. And it currently now allows, sir, it would allow for the Child Care Board staff, the Child Protection Agency staff, to visit the home of the child and to have regular visits. You see this on TV all the time. On TV, when you have a child protection thing, you see the officer going to the household and having regular visits and doing reports and monitoring the child, sir. We put this into this legislation, sir. This is a progressive approach, and it fosters family reunification, sir, and it embodies the child's right to family, and it maintains, sir, the court, allows the court still to manage the circumstances. So we do both. This is a win-win, sir. A win-win-win. It's a win for the court, it's a win for the system, but it really is a win for the family, and it is a win for the children. It is the most progressive piece of legislation for children, sir. And when this is done, sir, we will find ourselves in a position, sir, where we can better serve our children. The custody care order, sir, on the other hand, is delineated under Section 42, and it allows, sir, it arises where there is no likelihood of family reunification. Like you've tried everything. You've tried everything. And there's no possibility that you can reunify this family, then the law would be such that the authority must act to place the child in the custody of that same authority. But only after you've gone through these processes. This is not a willy-nilly piece of legislation, sir. This is serious legislation, sir, that protects the children. And also it prevents that whole idea that you could languish in care forever. Because at the end of the day, they must submit that care plan and always ask what is in the best interest of the children, sir. So that this legislation, sir, would make sure that even though a child is in custody, sir, that at the end of the day, sir, when you have drawn up what they call a permanency plan, because everything now is about a plan. The Child Care Board cannot act freely. They don't have the right to just go and do what they want to do, because everybody has to be held responsible. So that in this permanency plan, sir, it says these are the things that would matter, sir, in relation to taking care of the child, sir. And then in relation to the offenses, sir, to children, sir, if you leave a child unsupervised or unattended, under Section 60, there is a fine of $25,000 or a term of imprisonment of 5 years or both. Now, all law, I believe, stands the test of reasonableness. And this is not to say that every time something happens, you can go and snatch at the people's children. It's not that. But obviously, after investigation, if it is felt that this particular household is a threat to the child, then you have to do something. But there are circumstances, sir, there will be mitigating factors, sir, that would have to be considered. So not everybody is going to have to pay this $25,000 because I know how it goes. Somebody in press or on social media is going to say, no, if it's popped to the shop, the Child Care Board wants to charge me $25,000. This is not that case. But you have to make sure that you leave your child secure. But truth be told, there has been an incident in Barbados where that did happen, though, where somebody left home and said they were going to the shop, and a fire broke out, and we lost a child. So, of course, there have to be circumstances, sir, where you have to make sure that everything is done in the best interest of the child. And then, of course, we speak to cruelty to children, sir, and this, sir, is perhaps one of the more important things in this bill. I mean, I think penalties and fines should come last, and we've discussed a whole range of other options. But I've said to you, sir, I've seen fines of $960, some real arbitrary numbers, $488, I don't know why, but arbitrary numbers. But in this case, in this bill, if you violate, sir, and you exhibit some kind of cruelty to children, and reflected under the things that we say for which a child might need protection under Section 5, there is a fine of $100,000 or imprisonment for a term of 10 years or both, because we are serious. This is a serious government, serious about protecting the nation's children. A fine of $100,000 or imprisonment for a term of 10 years or both, sir. So this is to say to people who are abusing children that this government is serious. We are all serious about advancing legislation, sir, that protects the children, sir. And I believe, sir, this sounds very cliche, but it's only cliche because its simple truth lends to its easy repetition. But that children are indeed the future. And that if we continue to do things to damage our children, then invariably what we are doing are things to damage our future. I have now lived long enough. The Bible says, sir, I was young and now I'm old, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread. I was young and now I'm old. But I also know, sir, that, life is a wheel. Life is a wheel. I watch my mother now. I hope she's not listening to this part, but I watch my mother now as she gets older, sir, slower, moving slower. Eventually, children become adults, And the same parents and the same guardians who abuse their children are going to have to rely on some of those children. So if you don't want to do it because it's the right thing to do it in your own self-interest then. Because at the end of the day, sir, children eventually will be the persons who have to take care of them. I had a conversation recently, sir, with a lady, sir, a professional lady, and she told me that she and her mother they have no relationship at all. This is a professional woman. People would cast judgment on her because she has no relationship with her mother. She's a horrible woman, they would say. But she told me that when she was a child, she was abused. And she knows that her mother knows, and she cannot even bring herself to look at her mother. This is a woman known across Barbados. It's a popular person, sir. So that you see these things, sir, you do not know what is going on in somebody else's mind, but I do know that eventually the people that we take advantage of might be the very persons that we have to lean upon. I know that. I had I saw a picture this morning of an honorable member showing some love to her mom this morning. But I also remember when that honorable member's mom was taking care of her daily. And that is the way the cycle of life goes. And that we cannot take it for granted that we who are at a certain point in our life will be always at this point in our life. If you want this society to work, because I also have responsibility for the elderly, When I watch people who get older say that the children aren't taking care of them, I have to ask myself what it is that happened with the children. Because these things come back. And life is a cycle, sir. At the end of the day, sir, even as it relates to children who have disabilities, sir, there is at the Nightingale Village facility, we have children there who were there when you were there, actually. They're no longer children. They're the children in terms of their cognitive capacity, some of them, and some because they're physically disabled, and no one wants to claim them. But we have children who are still at Nightingale's facility, sir, who are disabled adults in that facility with no one to come and claim them, no one to care for them in many cases, besides the staff of the Child Care Board, who I must tell you do a wonderful job. I couldn't talk about the Nightingale facility, though, and not talk about the Barbados Children's Trust that spent millions of dollars, sir. I think everyone in this parliament needs to thank them because they spent millions of dollars to repair that facility to the point where the Nightingale facility is a first-class facility in Barbados to house our children. And I thank the Barbados Children's Trust for the work that they would have done, sir. But if you go there, you see adults, sir, still there. Because disabled children still are not getting a good deal. So that for everything that I mentioned that affects children, it affects persons with disabilities twofold, threefold, and so on, sir. We have a lot of work to do in this country. Barbados has a lot of work to do to protect its children. So that when we offer a fine of $100,000, sir, it should be $1 million. It should be $1 million. Because I know, sir, that when a child is abused, sir, you cheat that child of its life. For real. And that the amount of work that you have to do, sir, to try to build back that child's self-esteem, to build back that child's confidence, to allow that child to be a productive member of the society. Then when you cast stigma on the child for the rest of the child's life, the child can't walk down the street. You know she child from she father. No Bajans. You know that child belongs to she father. The stigma associated with it is rough. Then the justice system, sir, sometimes can be slow. Also rough. So you're victimized everywhere along this process, sir. Very important work that all of us have to be able to do. So, sir, okay, sir. So, sir, you know that at some point we're going to be sending this bill, sir, to a select committee, sir. But these things are so important that they need to be ventilated this morning, sir. And I trust, sir, that all the work that is being done, sir, that's listed in this bill, sir, will serve only to protect the nation's children, sir, and we are committed to all of it, sir.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this bill be postponed and for further consideration.
Second. The question is that this bill be postponed for further consideration. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is postponed for further consideration. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to move the suspension of the House until 1:45 p.m. today.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 1:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 1:45 p.m.
In the name of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to move the second reading of the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I wish to thank all members of this honorable chamber for allowing me to draw on their time as I seek to give you 4, possibly 5 hours of presentation on what has transpired at Three Houses Spring and River Plantation. But if I may be so minded that we all have busy schedules, that time can very well be reduced to an hour and a half or 2. Mr. Speaker, when I reflect on my days as a boy growing up in St. Philip, being very cognizant of the location at River and the Three Houses Spring, where we as boys would travel from Church Village to walk to Three Houses Spring. Yes. It's the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Act and the BADC BADMC amendment, which, Mr. Speaker, will be a cognate debate. And they are inextricably linked.
The question is that those two bills be treated as a cognate debate. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think yes. Continue, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as we traverse from Church Village to Tree Houses, where we would go to the spring, 1 for recreation, 2 to fish, and 3 explore Tree Houses, I believe I'm in the ideal position to speak to 1, what used to be at Tree Houses Spring and River Plantation, and what is currently the case at River Plantation. Now, as a boy, having experienced River and Tree Houses, River by dint of its name is a place that is prone to flooding. And Tree Houses, the plantation, when we were pretty much involved in a sugar industry that saw all of Barbados planted up in sugarcane, it is important to note that we need to come to terms with our reality, sir. And so therefore the effort on my part really is to seek to bring justice to what is happening at River, particularly as it relates to the Tree Houses Spring. Now, we didn't just arrive at this position, Mr. Speaker, and so therefore I wish to use this opportunity to thank my permanent secretary, who is here with us, and indeed the CEO acting of BADMC, for being on this journey with us to be able to get this bill before Parliament. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I believe that there are times in our life when we have to reflect, particularly when we know the genesis of what we're dealing with. And when I search my soul to determine what it is that I can use as an anchor for where I stand on this issue, I referred to Drummond. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, "I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again," unquote. And I think, Mr. Speaker, you will understand and appreciate that having been raised by the people of Church Village and indeed St. Philip, and being part of a culture where farming is at the core of their very existence, this opportunity that has been given to me and the honor to serve in this honorable chamber to represent that which is right by the people of St. Philip is about fitting for me to refer to Drummond. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have a situation at River where previously, and this is prior to climate change, water would flow throughout that stream all the way down to a catchment called Bronx Pond. And in those days, really, dating back to the 18th century, there were never major challenges in terms of water damming or water flow, because at the time when this legislation was passed, this is the second piece of legislation that would have been passed in the Parliament, but the first one that was really proclaimed. And Mr. Speaker, this legislation basically spoke to how the stream was supposed to be used and how people were supposed to behave. There's something along that stream called riparian rights. And riparian rights refer to people who live or own property along the stream, who had an entitlement to access the water from the stream for a total of either 8 or 40 hours in a given day. But at no time should the stream be obstructed to the extent that the flow of the water is discontinued. And therefore, farming along that area, particularly livestock farming, was allowed and without any restrictions for access to water. At the time, the legislation also allowed for commissioners to be appointed and magistrate police to be appointed to manage the functioning of the stream. Those days, sir, are over. We have no such arrangement in place, and therefore you would find that what obtains now at River will be that those people, the riparian owners, still have access to the water. The farmers upstream still have access to the water, and those downstream may or may not get water, depending on the time of the year. And you will be fully aware that at this time of the year where we are going through the drought period, and with the vicissitudes of climate change, you would find that the flow in itself is less. Because of the constant clearing of the stream, it has expanded the stream. And then, on top of all that, sir, the upstream farmers would seek to create dams within the stream. So what would happen is that the stream has a natural flow. You bring a piece of heavy equipment, you dig out a catchment area, sometimes 6 feet, sometimes 8 feet, 10 feet. That water first has to flow into that catchment area before it can overflow and continue its natural course. And then, were that not bad enough, sir, you also have a situation where private owners would seek to create their own dams for purposes of recreation and other things. Now, Mr. Speaker, obviously, when we were in good times, when we had a stronger flow coming down the stream, this may not have posed a major threat to the existence of the farmers in the area. But as time went by and we started to battle with climate change, things changed. Now, Mr. Speaker, I recall seeing repeatedly in the press farmers at River and St. Philip complaining about access to water for farming. I do also recall, Mr. Speaker, sir, where many of the people who live between Bayfield, St. Catharines, Marley Vale, Bushy Park, Vineyard, and Sanford would from time to time complain that something must have gone radically wrong for the stream to slow down the way it did and for the farmers downstream to be impacted the way they are impacted. This, of course, carried on for decades. We know that this act dates back to over 300 years. And I heard the Honourable member for St. Michael South speaking about dated legislation. But I'm yet to find peace on our books that can be as dated as this one. And I think that we really need to do right by the people of Barbados. And so the type of work that we had to put in to make this legislation relevant to contemporary existence, sir, was absolutely necessary. The dated legislation spoke to fines and pounds or pence. It spoke to commissioners and police magistrates and those types of things which are practically non-existent now. And sir, as a man lettered in law, were you to read that legislation, you would have to take a breath and wonder where they were going without full stops and commas and colons and those types of things. And really and truly, interpretation of law at that time must have been very difficult because the subjective nature of it, especially given the way the language was constructed could have led to many different interpretations. And that's why the importance of punctuation in law is necessary. Now, I'm not lettered in law, but I feel that from what I've seen, particularly as a businessman, and what I've had to deal with, it makes perfect sense to me that interpretation is important. And so there was no suitable fit, Mr. Speaker, for that type of legislation at all in our current existence. And therefore, we engaged a consultant, one of Barbados's finest, and I know that I shouldn't really call the name, but one of Barbados's finest. And we met with the riparian owners along the stream, in addition to all the farmers at River Plantation, well, all those who showed up, because I may very well hear after this, or they didn't talk to me. So all those who showed up, if I am to get my language correct. And Mr. Speaker, we had 2 sessions plus a final session in order for us to share what the plans were, and at the same time, allow for us to take feedback from the riparian owners and from the farmers at River. Having done all of that, we were then able to settle on what this legislation was going to be and how we would seek to get the Attorney General's certificate so we can pass this through Cabinet and be here to present this on the behalf of the people of St. Philip and indeed the people who do farming at River Plantation. Mr. Speaker, there is no joke when I tell you that when we were part of the opposition in this honorable chamber, we had a program called Rubbing Shoulders. And one day, a Rubbing Shoulders visit was taken to River Plantation to see what was happening up there with the farmers. And most of those farmers told us about the way the stream was being blocked, the way the stream was being used for recreational purposes, the way farmers created diversions to the stream, the way pumps were being placed in the stream for prolonged hours, the way the stream was being polluted, sir, and more importantly, the way the farmers downstream were losing their crops because the water wasn't flowing into Bronx Pond. We actually had to use trucks at one time, Mr. Speaker, to move water up the river to fill Bronx Pond so that farmers can get access to water. Such was the struggle of those farmers at River. On that Rubbing Shoulders visit, we gave the assurance that if we were to come to government, this nonsense had to stop. We also gave the assurance that what is good for one must be good for the other, and that all of them must be able to exist in harmony with access to the water at Three Houses Spring. Mr. Speaker, coming out of that, we made a decision that we had to do right by the farmers who exist at River Plantation. A River Plantation is a plantation of 400 acres of land. There are just about 100 farmers who are registered to farm at River, and there is some 60 acres of land that is currently in cultivation. But because of the limited access to water, we cannot yet get all 400 acres in production, and that is sad. Mr. Speaker, you would hear me on more than one occasion speak in this honorable chamber about access to land and the challenges we are facing with water, and that any farmer or individual who must enjoy access to water from Three Houses Spring to the disadvantage and detriment or loss of investment of farmers downstream is absolutely wrong. As a matter of fact, there is a simple injustice in all of this. And therefore, we could not sit idly by and watch this situation continue. Many of the farmers would call me 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when they're going out to say, we haven't received water coming down the stream. I am going to go and check. I will do a video and I will send it to you. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction, and I'm not going to call the farmers' names, but they will all go and remove concrete blocks, plywood, pipes, all types of things that were used to block the stream from its natural flow. The BADMC had up a sluice gate up there with a camera, and that was completely ignored. Camera was taken out of commission. Water diverted from that sluice gate to the other side of the stream, Mr. Speaker, so that those farmers who have leased private land can get access to water, and to the deprivation of those who are actually legitimately on lands managed by the BADMC. And Mr. Speaker, when we became government, we placed priority on how we can actually right this wrong. And therefore, the Prime Minister, with her team, and I and my team, we revisited River. And I kid you not, Mr. Speaker, those farmers were so happy to see her because they were accustomed to seeing me, and I suppose the choice between her and me, they would obviously go for her, because I will never be able to stand, Mr. Speaker, in her shoes when it comes to confronting these issues and being brutally frank about how we have to deal with them. Well, Mr. Speaker, one farmer came up and he started to complain. And I saw tears. You know how we have these emojis where people laugh and the tooth ears flying up the side of the eyes? I saw the man crying with the tears popping out the side of his eyes because he was so happy to see that we came there to bring relief to them after he had lost about an acre of okras, pumpkins, etc., during the drought season. And we made a promise that we would repeal this act to make sure that we can bring justice to what is taking place at River. Because many times, when the stream was blocked, to be very honest, I would say to the extension officer, and the acting CEO of BADMC can bear me out on this, go and report the matter to the police. Take the evidence and go to the police. But the police really couldn't do anything either, because the law in its present form required a police magistrate or one of the commissioners to be able to take action, and we had none of them. And then, Mr. Speaker, we also asked the extension officers and the team to travel the natural course of the spring to determine wherever there is a block, we shall remove it. But that in itself is literally an impossible task. Because to walk that entire stream, sir, to search for where people have set up blocks along the stream can take not only a couple of days, but it can be at fairly high risk. And high risk because, one, you may have to traverse private owners' property, and they had no authority to do that. And then equally, you had to also be wary of the fact that people may use the opportunity to vent their feelings about the blocks that are in the stream that were about to be removed, and this can result in conflict that no one wants to have to deal with. We feel that the way to settle all of this then would have been to come with contemporary legislation, Mr. Speaker, that would allow for everybody to be able to function at River and have an opportunity and a fair chance to maintain their crops and protect the investment that they were putting in. Now, The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security has a lot of agricultural programs currently going on. If I were to ask anybody what is the biggest challenge that we face in delivering for the farmers in Barbados, I think most people will get it right. I am convinced that 99.9% of the people that we ask will get it right. Because the biggest problem that we face is the same problem that we're currently facing for domestic consumption of water, and that is water for the farmers. Now, I have read, even in today's newspaper, I have read extensively, Mr. Speaker, on issues relating to water. People have spoken about desalination. People have spoken about water reuse. People have spoken about the same springs. As a matter of fact, if you were to listen to the call-in programs, Mr. Speaker, I would say dating back some 10 years. And then there was another time when I was a lot younger, I would listen to a program called Tell It Like It Is. And there was a gentleman called the Cement Man. And these gentlemen who called the call-in programs all articulated very well that, one, we should go to water catchments in order for us to support agriculture in Barbados, and that is what this government has done, you know. When I calculated the amount of money that we can end up spending, and I've said this before, in order for us to provide water for the farmers in Barbados, you're talking well over $100 million. And this government has set about to provide water for the farmers of Barbados by doing the catchments. We have phase one at River. Phase two is to go by the hot pond at Tree Houses Spring. And then we've done all the others, and we are doing drilling at the north of the island rather than do catchments, because you still have to have water to fill the catchment. But this spring is about the perfect example that you can find, sir, for us to be able to do a catchment and use the natural flow of the water to fill the pond and allow for people to have an irrigation system that allows for everybody to get water. Mr. Speaker, the changes that we made to the legislation were not made to disadvantage anyone at all. As a matter of fact, I can very well argue, and everyone who understands the culture in St. Philip and who's prepared to take a side for or against will all say one thing: this legislation is fair to everybody. And it is fair, sir, because people would just tell you, man, knock down everything, leg it up, let the water flow, man, break up everything, and don't care about certain people. This legislation isn't doing that, you know. What this legislation is doing is allowing for the intent of where the first piece of legislation was going, and that is to continue to allow the riparian owners to have access to the water. But what it is also doing, it is allowing now for a management system to be put in place through the BADMC so that they can take full management control of the river plantation and in particular the management of that spring. Mr. Speaker, previously, if an extension officer had gone on anybody's private land, that extension officer would be in severe trouble. If an extension officer dared to tell anyone on their private property, you have to discontinue your catchment for a period of time, that extension officer could very well find himself in danger. This management program literally allows now for these officers of the BADMC to give 3 days' notice and to say, we are coming to see what arrangement you have going on there so that we can make sure that the water can continue to flow down to Browns Pond. Now, Browns Pond, as we know it, in the 1713 legislation was the final point to where that water is supposed to go, so that you can avoid flooding of the area. And I said earlier that the area, by dint of its name, river, was prone to severe flooding. As a matter of fact, some 7 or 8 years ago, the river was so flooded out that people had to use these little dinghies to be able to get through there in order to get to the land. So that is the nature of the place. So that Bronx Pond must be able to collect water. And that's the reason why we expanded it to the extent that it can take 6 million gallons of water, but at the same time use the wells close by in order for the water to flow off into the wells. I find it impossible, sir, that that stream is still flowing, but the water is having a difficulty getting to Bronx Pond. And therefore, it tells me that there is some act that is taking place upstream that must be dealt with. Mr. Speaker, when this legislation is passed, the officers of the BADMC will now take full control of the entire river construct. And anybody that is blocking that stream will be dealt with accordingly. It is not going to be a case where there is going to be any acrimony, because the legislation is very clear. You may do so for 8 and 40 hours accordingly. But if you have a permanent structure, Mr. Speaker, sir, one that is there where the water is constantly flowing in on a 24-hour basis, that has to stop, sir. When I looked at the stream, I saw all different sized pipes going in to the natural flow of water. Mr. Speaker, you don't have pipes in the natural flow of a stream or a river, of a spring. The fact that we can have 8-inch pipes going through a tunnel and under a bridge to divert the water from the stream is wrong. And whilst I may agree that perhaps in order to allow an owner along the stream to have access to catchments for the water, that arrangement now has to be settled by the BADMC and the engineers to determine what size pipes can be used. And they must make sure that all times they are doing right by the people, because the legislation also allows for compensation. So that if an officer takes it upon himself to be rude or feel that he must be hostile and he damages the people's property or their crop, there are consequences. So nobody can tell me when I walk away from here, or tell the honourable member for St. Philip North when she passes through, man, you all didn't do right by me because now all of a sudden we want to put this thing in place where we can't block the water. Well, you can't block the water because you're not supposed to block the water. And all of the farmers, those from St. Philip North, St. John, St. George, some from Christchurch, those from my constituency, sir, will now have access to water through an irrigation system that is going to be put in place by the BADMC. Sir, there will also be the introduction of sluice gates along the stream so that we can control the flow of the water. Now, I know many of you may know I went to Guyana and I saw a sluice gate in operation. It's a fascinating thing. I also saw it in the Panama Canal as well, where you allow for the water to build up and build up and build up, and then you release, and it goes to the next gate, and you build up and build up, and then you release. It's a fantastic thing. Well, Mr. Speaker, if we are not able to do these things, sir, the day will only come when somebody will decide that they're going to take action and take the law into their hands. And we are not here to allow for that to happen. Now, Mr. Speaker, we were very detailed in how we are going to go about this legislation, and that is why we took the time to meet with the owners and the farmers. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that nothing in this legislation can result in any severe criticism at all. As a matter of fact, I feel that when I go to St. Philip later, I may find myself being an unsung hero, because the amount of people that came to me, businessmen and otherwise, telling me that I must, as Minister of Agriculture, do something about this situation at River. I believe that it is timely, especially in this drought period, sir, especially at a time when we have to ration water, at a time when we are told by the Met Office that we are going to go through this period till possibly July, then I feel that it is timely that we respond. And therefore, this presentation this afternoon, this Honourable Chamber, is nothing but doing right by the people in St. Philip and particularly at River Plantation. Mr. Speaker, the legislation would also have regulations, and the provision of the regulations will be made in order for us to be able to deliver a number of things. One, types, size, and specification of pipes and pumps to be used for the abstraction of water from the spring. The use of water from the spring and the prioritization of its use. The rate of abstraction of water from the spring. The rates and charges for use of water from the spring. The exemption of persons from the payment of rates and charges for the use of water from the spring. And I've already mentioned who those persons are: owners of property where the stream runs through or adjacent. Special rates and charges payable in respect of the use of water and given effect to this bill generally. Now, Mr. Speaker, under the regulations, the minister may make penalties to a maximum of $1,000 or imprisonment for a period of 18 months. The regulations are also subject to negative resolution. Now, Mr. Speaker, I must tell you, and I must let all Barbados know, that there are also consequences for people who are prepared to get in the way, block the BADMC, stop the officers from carrying out their duties, and really and truly seek to prohibit the functioning of the officers. And a person found guilty of undertaking any of the specified activities is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $25,000 or 2 years imprisonment or both. Mr. Speaker, I do recall my officers sharing with me on many occasions the risk that they face in having to work at River and dealing with this water issue. And therefore, I think that what we have done, first of all, and I really want to underscore this because I don't want the wrong message to be conveyed. We didn't sit down and come up on our own with these. It is the owners and farmers who determine with us that these are the types of fines that they want to see. It is the owners along the stream and the farmers who suggested to us that we must stop people from polluting the water and that there must be a system through which the water can be tested. This, Mr. Speaker, is extremely important because coming down that stream into Bronx Pond will be live shrimp. We cannot afford to have the water polluted or contaminated in any way. Mr. Speaker, there's a mechanism for settlement of disputes, and therefore, there will be an oversight committee, mediators, and the possible engagement of the High Court. This is an important requirement that a party who is in dispute must notify the permanent secretary responsible for agriculture in writing of the existence of a dispute in order to commence the process of dispute settlement. The permanent secretary must forward correspondence to the chairman of the Oversight Committee within 3 days of receipt. The chairman of the Oversight Committee was agreed to be the general manager of the Barbados Water Authority, given the fact, one, we just agreed to an agricultural water rate. We agreed that all water management issues should be with the Barbados Water Authority, and that the BADMC, even though it had its own irrigation construct, they too had to work with the Barbados Water Authority in terms of being able to manage and implement the agricultural water rate. So, Mr. Speaker, there is going to be a fully implemented management system with an oversight committee, and therefore, anybody with a grievance should be able to get that grievance heard, and as I said, if not satisfied, this can go all the way to the High Court. Mr. Speaker, the farmers at River Plantation, this legislation provides for our BADMC tenants and lessees to extract water from Bounce Pond for irrigation purposes only, subject to the terms and conditions agreed between these persons and the corporation. The bill itself, Mr. Speaker, will see, in order for us to be able to effectively manage this, that we needed to make an amendment to Cap 254 to allow for the BADMC Act to be amended to insert where the BADMC shall now be responsible for the management and control of the Three Houses Spring and Three Houses Plantation. So, Mr. Speaker, if I were to go through now the bill itself, sir, in order to give you a feel for what the bill is and to give all Barbadians a feel for where we are, the objects and reason of the bill is A, the management and control of the spring known as Three Houses Spring; B, the categories of persons entitled to use the spring; C, the role and functions of the Barbados Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation in respect of management of the spring; the settlement of disputes relating to the use of the spring; the repeal and replacement of the Three Houses Spring Act 1713(1), and all related matters. The first section is the description of Three Houses Spring. The second carries a map of the spring, and the third schedule, refers to the riparian owners. Mr. Speaker, the BADMC will be the management entity under Cap 254 amendment, and this means that the Barbados Water Authority, which has an established bill, Water Authority Act Cap 274, must also be part of this process. And therefore, we believe that with the Barbados Water Authority being part of the process and the BADMC being the management entity, that we have done fair by everybody involved. Sir, the role and function of the BADMC shall be: maintain the proper alignment of the spring, keep and maintain registers of all persons entitled to abstract and use water from the spring, measure and regulate the flow of water from the spring, and establish the volume of distribution of water to maintain adequate water levels in the spring, regulate the manner in which water may be extracted from the spring and where the BADMC considers it necessary, install sluice gates or similar contrivances or devices to control the volume of flow of water, ensure the regular cleaning of the spring and areas surrounding the spring, transfer water from the spring to such channels, ponds, or reservoirs as may be deemed necessary or expedient, regulate the distribution of water from the spring among the persons entitled to receive and use water, take prompt action to prevent or rectify pollution of the spring, carry out tests to analyze the quality of the water, cause the abatement of any nuisance, and finally, establish water rates for the extraction and use of the water from the spring after consultation with the BWA. Mr. Speaker, there's a caveat. In the case of emergencies, there's an exception, sir. Where the BADMC is satisfied that the spring is in danger of its water being depleted or that there is an imminent threat to the spring, the BADMC may do all necessary to protect and preserve the spring. Where the Bronx Pond becomes flooded, the BADMC shall take such measures as are necessary or expedient, including channeling excess water into wells south of Bronx Pond to alleviate the effectiveness of the flooding and to protect the crops and livestock of tenants and lessees of riparian owners or the BADMC. Sir, under this arrangement, the BADMC shall serve no notice, but will report after under cases of emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this legislation in itself would have modernized what was currently in place. And here's the part, sir, Mr. Speaker, that all should be satisfied that we have done right by the people at River. Persons entitled to use water. A person shall be entitled to use the water from the spring free of charge for the purposes of, and I want to be very clear, entitled to use the water for the purposes of shorebird hunting, model boat racing, fishing, maintenance of a bird or wildlife sanctuary, bathing or religious practices. And these, of course, are subject to any regulations made under this Act for riparian owners, lessees, tenants, licensees of riparian owners, and persons claiming title from the riparian owners. Mr. Speaker, this bill, sir, is, to my mind, one of the finest pieces of legislation that brings justice, first of all, for a class of people who always felt as though they were being ignored, and when hitherto never felt as though there would ever be any justice coming their way. These are ordinary people from all walks of communities across St. Philip, St. George, St. John, Christchurch. My constituency, the Honourable Member for St. Philip West constituency, the Honourable Member for St. Philip North constituency, sir, the Honourable Member for St. John. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we had to do this in order for us to be able to settle these problems that were taking place at River. And, sir, I sincerely hope that when this passes through the upper chamber, that we should be able to get this in place as fast as possible, because this act shall come into operation on a date to be fixed by proclamation, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really have a short intervention, mainly because I am the parliamentary representative for St. Philip North, and it really would be remiss of me not to speak on this bill. I remember, Mr. Speaker, one of my first interventions in Parliament involved the conversation about the damming of the actual spring by one of my constituents. At that time, you would almost want to say it was angry at the fact that this constituent proceeded to dam the stream, and the honourable members for St. Philip South made it sound very pleasant at the time, but proceeded to dam the stream so that for recreational purposes, i.e., what I consider to be a lake in the middle of St. Philip North with a lake house and all the attendant pieces of equipment to it. So I am more than welcoming this piece of legislation. I really don't have any issues, just one small issue which will come at the end of my presentation. I just want to agree with the honourable member who presented that this would be a welcome relief for the farmers indeed of St. Philip North and those outside of St. Philip North who have been complaining. I've learned a lot from his presentation, mainly the fact that I paid special attention to was the rubbing shoulders in my constituency. Perhaps I was on vacation or something. I never remember going to these rubbing shoulders in my constituency, but I'm glad to learn of them, that and the other intervention from the honourable member. And I hope next time to be invited. I live and work at one point at that time within a hop, skip, and a jump of the area, and I was very surprised to hear him mention that rubbing shoulders happened up there with the farmers. So I beg of him to include me the next time. I'm not necessarily a farmer, but I'm sure I could find a pair of boots to come with you. And in fact, I walked a lot of the area on the stream. This is how I can tell you about the damming of the stream. I am aware of the agricultural businesses that go on, including animal husbandry, the cows and so on, in my constituency. But I am grateful for the bill. I just want to speak about some of the things that happen in St. Philip North, which I am very much aware of. That area of the Tree Houses Spring is becoming an area that is really well patronized by all members of the public, from as far as St. Lucie to the tip of St. Philip in terms of the park, Tree Houses Park, and with the attendant stream. As a girl, I was not privileged like the honourable member to be able to walk around and visit streams. Girls just never did that. But listening to my brother and indeed my father who is now 91 years old, will be able to tell me about the activities that carried on within the spring. For instance, fishing for crayfish. Time has done something to that. I have seen in my 51 years of life one crayfish. And to me, that is a measure of the pollution that could be happening, the various activities along the stream. One of the things I do not like to see, members of the public tend to wash their cars along the banks of the stream. And with that comes not only dust, but oils and grease, which of course are harmful to the few wildlife that we know that now exists within the stream. Apart from that, and I was told that it was back in the day, it was an area for socialization. People wash their clothes, people bathe. And in fact, the Rastafarian community, both religious purposes and hygiene purposes, they actually use the spring for baths. And we are now seeing members of the Muslim community using that area as well, and we welcome them, of course, to St. Philip North. The opportunities for business, of course, exist from one end of the spring all the way to the others. I remember horticultural business being there, selling plants and flowers, and in fact, many of the plants that I own now came out of that, the old Tree Houses plantation. He's no longer there, and that's the issue I wish to discuss with the honourable member outside of these chambers. But there is vast opportunity for that. The prospect that the honourable member mentioned of aquaculture in the area is very exciting to me, at least in my mind. To have shrimp in the area, to have crayfish back, there must be a few hanging around that we can capitalize on, and that could only add to the betterment of the country in terms of food reserves. And I'm very excited on that end. Some of the things that came out to me off the paper when they read the legislation, the honourable Prime Minister is here, so you want to say a paper off my computer screen, was the fact that, and not paper, was the fact that we are putting measures in place to keep up regular cleaning of the spring. And I so welcome that. This is an area along the spring that I would traverse. It's a hot note every morning to go to St. Catherine's School to provide breakfast. And I was well aware all along about when the damming took place. In fact, I took pictures when there was absolutely no water coming through. I probably still have them. And sometimes it was just overgrown. So I'm happy that that will be looked into, regular cleaning. The fact that we will now begin testing of the water is also a big relief, bearing in mind that children often wade, adults wade in the spring. And please note that I do not say swim. You cannot learn to swim in the spring. And I will bring this up till I get what I need to get for St. Philip and St. George and the other communities. But members of the public really don their bathing suits and have a fun day when they picnic within the pond, within the spring, the stream. So I'm happy that we'll be doing testing, not only for human purposes, but for the small population of fish that exists within the pond and the agricultural grounds that exist within the pond. The honourable member responsible, honourable member for Christchurch West Central, I will take up his mantle when I talk about ecosystems and so on within that stream. While I say that, I want to just put a plug into water wastage. There are areas that you have provided, the ministry has provided irrigation that often leak. In fact, honourable member, through you, Mr. Speaker, I had reported a leak near me about 3 weeks ago, and the grass is growing, the only part in my property that is growing very green and lush. So I hope it can be addressed very, very soon. It's not on my end, I'm not paying for it, but that is for the betterment of the country. So we'll discuss that. So it'll be good to maintain the pipes and address any areas of leakages and so on. We are now a water scarce country that is really, really, really suffering. I will soon be finished. My interventions are not usually long. One of the things that popped out at me also was the mention of shorebird hunting in tandem with a nature reservoir. I just don't see how it meshes, one, and two, being somewhat of an environmentalist, the fact that shorebird hunting is there is bothering me a little bit. One, do we have an overpopulation of birds? The only thing I'm seeing coming up there now are parrots, but I can't say they're overpopulated. Two, a lot of the birds passing through the area are migratory that add a lot to the environment, whether it be their eggs when they hatch, that's calcium for the grounds. I remember you're shaking your head. Whether it be by mixing up the soils, whether it be all of that. So the fact that we have something here from the old legislation that speaks about shore bird fishing bothers me a bit. I don't know what kind of ammunition we use, but our research, things like lead can pollute the soil, can pollute the water, and lead poisoning in adults is very, very, very dangerous, much less a pregnant mother or a child that uses the agricultural products from these areas. So I encourage you, if it's not too late, to have a look at that part of it. And I know a lot of people will be with me right now. The fight is on with the monkeys. Monkeys against human, I would hate to think it's shorebirds. Many of them migratory against us. I had a look at the members of the Oversight Committee, which I am in full agreement with, but I am wondering if it may not be worthwhile to put an environmentalist on that committee, somebody that will lend guidance to how we basically treat the spring and the water. And of course, have a representation on the committee that represents not only the larger landowners. I had the fortune of getting in a vehicle with one of our more, what should I say, vanilla-minded members of the community, and was shown, this is the closest I got to realizing what Jesus felt. I was put in the back of a car and showed these are the 400 acres that we own and all of this is mine. I am hoping on this committee that this committee will have representation from maybe the smaller landowners, that they will certainly have a voice. I am seeing the members of the riparian community, and a lot of them on my research are actually large, very large landowners in the area. If my colleague from the St. Michael, East, from St. Michael East were here, or he's probably listening to me, he would be kind of taken aback of one of the names here that has been given a bit of trouble in several ministries. And I do not digress any further on that. Other than to say I am happy with the legislation except for the two things that I've mentioned, or one or two things that I've mentioned, and I hope it solves many of the issues. My hope is that we not only pass it, but we implement it. We have seen a lot of legislation pass, and I veer a little bit here. For instance, the breathalyzer test, that nothing is happening. A good friend of mine had got an accident the other night, and if it gets to the law courts, I don't know what happened. So I want to see this legislation actually implemented, that we could. I have reservations on the compliance of one of these landowners, and I'm hoping that with this legislation we can actually say, all right, you have done wrong, you'll be charged, you'll be fined, whatever. So I hope it comes to the fore, regardless of their financial standing, regardless of the acreage that they actually own, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of the amount of melanin they have in the skin. I am hoping that when it reaches the other chamber that this is passed with flying colors, and I congratulate the honourable member for St. Philip South for bringing it. It's long in coming, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the honourable member who has, in her typical style, defended her constituents. And I am very proud to note that we have such a member sitting in this honourable chamber, sir. Just to bring clarity to a couple of things raised. The rubbing shoulders exercise took place when we were in opposition, before all of our candidates were settled. And therefore, it would have been nice to have you then, but I think you were nominated well after that, rubbing shoulders. The one that took place when I became minister, you were absent, and for that, yes, I agree that we will endeavor in future to make sure that you are everyone, including having your name on the plaque for the opening of the Bronx Barn. As far as the maintenance is concerned, I agree, and there's going to be a full maintenance program to make sure that we don't have debris and those sorts of things in the stream, pollutants, copper and those sorts of things that you mentioned. There's going to be a full maintenance program. The issue with birds, the tree houses spring ran in such a way that it made its way all the way down to a place called Wiltshires. And then there was another stream by Wiltshires where water no longer gets down to Wiltshires for some reason. We got to find out why. And when this is passed, I think we'll be able to enter the premises of persons along that area to find out if what the residents and the people who know the area is telling us is true. Well, we can't test it yet until this is passed. But a lot of migratory birds will come down there. And really and truly, I enjoy seeing them. I know people who went out and took photographs, etc., and have these various species of birds. The honourable member for Christchurch West Central would tell you that he has absolutely no problems because of Barbados's biodiversity. But there are times when it is fully accepted that bird shooting is something that takes place. It is a special type of bird. It's not the type of bird that would in any way cause us to have any alarm. Just like people eat chicken, they eat birds. I would get the species and let you know. But there are some birds that they use, and when they're having their swamp side parties and Saturday recreation, etc., those birds are the type of birds, just like chicken, just like duck, just like anything else. You know, when people have a certain palate, they tend to go towards certain things. But I don't see that to be really a major challenge because this is not an everyday thing. And it's probably not an every weekend thing either. I take the point about pollutants. This is something that the Ministry of Environment, my colleague and I are working on, and we will continue to do so. There's a project that is coming out on the FAO that we will sign off on soon that allow us to continue to do that kind of work. Soil management and protection of the environment is something that is high on our agenda. But I thank you for raising those points nonetheless. As far as the committee is concerned, the committee really is a committee for settling disputes, and you are absolutely right. The owners along that stream are people with large tracts of land. There are no small people around there. And that was so long before our time. The small people really are the farmers who would fall under the BADMC, and it's the BADMC that has the management control. So I am absolutely confident that the BADMC will do whatever it takes to look after the interests of those small farmers who have 1 acre and 2 acres of land at river. And so I am comfortable that this oversight committee is going to deal with disputes. And as I said, if it doesn't work after they have used their best efforts, then it goes to mediation, and if that doesn't work, then the next obvious place will be to the high courts. So there are 2 things that we need to note, that the oversight committee really is to manage disputes, but the small people are not left out, because the management by the BADMC, the management that will be in place is going to take care of all of those small people who currently are the ones suffering because there's no legislation to deal with the situation. So I hope that clarifies, and we can always have our conversation thereafter to make sure that I do what is right by you, because my first political footprints took place in St. Philip North. So, Mr. Speaker, with that being said, sir, I beg to move that
Second time.
this bill be read a second time.
Questions that the bill be ready a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair for further consideration for this House to be formed into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair, and the House resolves itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 stand part.
The question is that Clause 7 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 8 stand part.
The question is that Clause 8 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 9.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 9 stand part.
The question is that Clause 9 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 10.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 10 stand part.
The question is that Clause 10 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 11.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 11 stand part.
The question is that Clause 11 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 12.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 12 stand part.
The question is that Clause 12 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 13.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 13 stand part.
The question is that Clause 13 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 14.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 14 stand part.
The question is that Clause 14 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 15 stand part.
The question is that Clause 15 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 16.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 16 stand part.
The question is that Clause 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill. The first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule will be the schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule will be the second schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the third schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule will be the third schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you don't report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable members for St. Philip South. The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Act 2023.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the. Oh, sorry.
Honourable Leader is the second bill.
Order number 11, sir. In the name of the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to move the second reading of the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment to the CAP 254 was basically for us to be able to introduce a management system within the BADMC for management and control, sir, of the Three Houses Spring and Three Houses Plantation. This was meant all to be part of this debate, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, this being a cognate debate, the CAP 254 amendment, sir, I beg to move that the amendment would also form part of this.
No, you have to move that the bill be read a second time.
I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Pardon? Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you now leave the chair for His House to resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do now leave the chair for the House to resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation Amendment Act be now passed and so cited.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Thank
Honorable
you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've now officially come to the end of today's sitting, and I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until next Tuesday, the 23rd of May at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of May at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of May, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.